Ellen Ellie Wake grew up in the quiet suburb of Westchester, Ohio, admired for her kindness and outgoing personality. At 23, she had completed her studies, begun shaping a promising future. Friends remembered a creative soul who loved art. Nature walks brought her joy, and she often captured striking images of local landscapes to share online. Her family was the most important thing in her life. Her parents encouraged all her ambitions. Her younger sister looked up to her as a role model. Ellie was also very active in her community, participating in charity events and offering help whenever she could. Yet behind her bright smile hid a troubling reality. For nearly a year, Ellie faced relentless harassment from Michael Strauss, a man she knew through local circles. He pushed for a connection she never wanted, sending uncomfortable messages, showing up at places she visited, reacting with hostility whenever she kept her distance. Ellie tried to continue living as usual, hoping the behavior would eventually fade. On July 29, 2018, she met a friend in the morning, then spent time outdoors near her home. Around 4:00 p.m., she was spotted walking toward her neighborhood. After that moment, she vanished. Her phone went silent, prompting immediate concern. When evening came with no sign of her return, her family launched a frantic search. Calls went out to relatives, friends, neighbors. Posts appeared online. Every familiar place was checked. Yet not a single clue emerged. That night, her parents filed a missing person report. From that moment, a case began that would shake Westchester's close-knit community and later become one of the region's most disturbing investigations. Police initiated their work by interviewing those closest to Ellie. They learned she had made no plans to leave town or meet anyone unexpected. Search teams quickly searched parks, wooded trails, and abandoned areas, all places Ellie liked to go. Volunteers helped officers look everywhere. But days went by, and they found nothing. The investigation turned to potential threats, and Michael Strauss's name kept coming up. People close to Ellie said he had been stalking her for months, sending threatening messages, and acting hostile. When questioned, Strauss denied everything, claiming he hadn't seen her that day. But detectives didn't believe him. A week into the investigation, police examined security camera footage from multiple locations. One video showed Ellie on a trail. Shortly after, a man who looked like Strauss walked the same trail. This was the first significant discovery in the case. Public attention intensified. Posters of Ellie appeared throughout town. Social media spread updates at lightning speed. Local stations reported daily developments. The community hoped for her safe return. Yet each silent day deepened the fear. 2 weeks after Ellie disappeared, tragedy struck. A farmer working near a wooded field discovered human remains. Authorities later confirmed the worst. The body belonged to Ellie Wake, hidden in dense undergrowth, roughly 10 kilometers from the place she was last seen. At the site, police uncovered several critical clues: fragments of clothing, traces of disturbed soil, plus subtle signs of a struggle. Identification moved quickly thanks to personal belongings discovered near the body. DNA testing soon confirmed the remains were Ellie's. Her family received the news as soon as the process concluded. The recovery of Ellie Wake's remains sent shockwaves through the community. Westchester, once viewed as a safe, quiet town, now carried an atmosphere of grief mixed with unease. For Ellie's family, the confirmation shattered the final bit of hope they had held during the long, agonizing search. Police immediately sealed off the field where her body had been found to protect every potential piece of evidence. Forensic specialists studied the ground inch by inch, documenting fabric remnants, possible footprints, stray fibers, plus unusual soil patterns. These details formed the first pieces of a forensic timeline. The autopsy provided detectives with essential insight. Ellie's cause of death was asphyxiation, with distinct marks on her neck suggesting pressure from a belt or similar object. Scratches and bruises revealed a violent struggle during her final moments. Evidence from the scene raised troubling questions. Certain fabric pieces did not belong to Ellie, hinting at another presence during the crime. A long strand of dark hair discovered on her body was sent for DNA testing with hopes of identifying a suspect. Throughout the investigation, Michael Strauss remained the primary focus. During interrogation, he again denied involvement, claiming he had stayed home on the day she disappeared. His alibi, however, lacked solid confirmation. Surveillance footage shows a man resembling Strauss following Ellie in the park, adding to suspicion. A breakthrough arrived when DNA from the hair recovered at the scene matched Strauss. The match gave investigators a powerful lead, though not enough for an immediate arrest. Surveillance on him intensified as detectives waited for additional evidence or missteps that could tie him conclusively to the murder. At this point, the investigation narrowed its focus on building a solid case against Strauss. Detectives reconstructed his movements on the day of Ellie's disappearance. Cellular data showed his phone had been near the trail where she was last seen, later shifting toward the wooded area where her body was discovered. Forensic experts also examined physical evidence. Fibers on Ellie's clothing matched the upholstery of Strauss's car seats. Soil particles on his vehicle's floor mats matched the soil in the forested field where Ellie's body had been hidden. Despite this growing body of circumstantial evidence, detectives pressed for stronger proof. A search warrant for Strauss's home uncovered disturbing items: notebooks containing entries about Ellie, photographs taken without her knowledge, plus a belt with a damaged buckle. Forensic analysis later linked this belt to the marks found on her neck, identifying it as the probable murder weapon. Michael Strauss was arrested on August 24, 2018. The arrest marked a major turning point in the case. Many residents felt a sense of relief. During his first questioning, Strauss seemed calm but avoided direct answers and consistently denied being involved. He claimed someone had changed the evidence to make him look guilty. Regardless of his claims, the investigation focused more and more on him. A major turning point happened when detectives looked at his computer and phone. They found he had been searching for disturbing things for months, like how to hide a body, information on how bodies decay, and in-depth studies of famous murder cases. His email history revealed dozens of unsent messages addressed to Ellie. Some expressed desperation for a meeting. Others contained threats or obsessive comments. These digital traces became the backbone of the formal charges against Michael Strauss. Prosecutors moved forward with accusations of kidnapping, stalking, plus premeditated murder. His attorney argued that no direct evidence linked him to the act of killing itself, yet the judge ruled that he would remain in custody while awaiting trial. Local media covered every development, fueling heated discussions throughout the community. Many residents believed in Strauss's guilt, while others doubted the reliability of the evidence. For Ellie's family, his arrest offered the first real step toward justice, though they knew the trial ahead would be long and painful. The trial of Michael Strauss began in October 2019, immediately drawing widespread public attention. The courtroom filled with journalists, community members, plus friends of Ellie Wake. Her family appeared at every session, determined to witness each detail. To them, the proceedings represented both a pursuit of justice and a final effort to honor Ellie's dignity. The prosecution opened with a strong case built on substantial evidence. Cell phone records placed Strauss near several locations tied directly to Ellie's disappearance as well as her death. Forensic specialists outlined their findings: fibers, soil traces, microscopic particles collected from Michael's car matched samples from the crime scene almost perfectly. Prosecutors also emphasized Michael's obsessive fixation on Ellie. Emails and messages retrieved from his devices were read aloud. One message, sent shortly before Ellie vanished, delivered a chilling warning: "If you don't respond, I'll come myself. Then you'll understand what I'm capable of." This message became a centerpiece of the argument for premeditation. Witnesses for the prosecution included close friends who described Ellie's fear of Strauss. Forensic experts strengthened the narrative by connecting physical evidence to him. Neighbors testified as well, recalling his suspicious behavior on the day Ellie disappeared. Several remembered seeing him return home visibly shaken, followed by meticulous cleaning of his car the next morning. The defense attempted to undermine the prosecution's case by highlighting gaps and questioning the strength of circumstantial evidence. Strauss's attorney argued that fibers or soil might have transferred through routine contact, while cell phone location data merely showed proximity, not guilt. The lack of eyewitnesses further became a key point in the defense strategy. The turning point arrived with presentation of the DNA findings. Genetic tests on the hair recovered near Ellie's body, along with skin cells found on the belt used to strangle her, conclusively matched Michael Strauss. His attorney challenged the lab's procedures, suggesting potential contamination. But the court dismissed these claims due to lack of credible support. Defense witnesses failed to shift the jury's perspective. Strauss chose not to testify, invoking his Fifth Amendment right. The decision sparked mixed reactions. Prosecutors portrayed it as silent acknowledgement of guilt, whereas the defense insisted it was a tactical choice to avoid risks during cross-examination. The trial lasted 6 weeks. More than 20 witnesses testified, supported by extensive forensic evidence, digital records, plus expert analysis. Closing arguments were emotionally charged. The prosecution demanded the harshest possible sentence, emphasizing the brutality and calculated nature of the crime. The defense maintained that reasonable doubt still existed. After 3 days of deliberation, the jury reached a unanimous decision. Michael Strauss was found guilty of first-degree murder, kidnapping, plus stalking. The judge then scheduled a sentencing hearing. Ellie Wake's family waited for justice, fully aware that no sentence could ever restore their daughter's life. The people of Westchester, still shaken by the horrific crime that disrupted their peaceful town, hoped for a punishment severe enough to reflect the enormity of the act while offering some measure of closure. During the sentencing hearing, the prosecution sought the harshest outcome: life imprisonment without parole. The prosecutor highlighted the calculated nature of Michael Strauss's actions, the months of fear he imposed on Ellie through relentless stalking, plus the permanent void left in her family's lives. Ellie had been robbed of her chance to grow, dream, pursue happiness. Michael Strauss was sentenced on April 17, 2019, in Butler County District Court in Hamilton. He received a prison sentence of 15 years to life for Ellie Wake's murder, 18 months for stalking, and 12 months for abuse of a corpse. The sentences will run consecutively. The courtroom response was overwhelming. Ellie's family wept, clinging to each other as they struggled through a mixture of relief and heartbreak. Justice had been served, yet their loss remained immeasurable. Strauss kept an expressionless face, the same detached demeanor he maintained throughout the trial. The community welcomed the verdict. Messages supporting the Wake family spread across social media, praising investigators as well as the prosecution team. Still, the case ignited broader conversations about how such a tragedy might have been prevented. Ellie's story exposed the far-reaching impact of stalking, prompting many to question weaknesses in the system meant to protect victims. Determined to create meaningful change, Ellie's family launched a campaign advocating reforms to Ohio's laws. They pushed for stronger penalties for stalking, improved protections for victims, plus quicker access to restraining orders. Months after the trial ended, Ohio passed a legislative amendment known as Ellie's Law. The measure increased penalties for stalking and expanded victims' rights to pursue legal safeguards. For Ellie's family, the law represented a step toward preventing similar tragedies. Michael Strauss's fate was sealed, yet Ellie's legacy continued to resonate. Her case stood as a powerful reminder to Westchester residents, a warning about the dangers of unchecked fixation, and a testament to the strength of a community united for safety and justice. After the trial, Ellie's family and friends devoted themselves to preserving her memory through projects centered on awareness and prevention. They hoped to honor her life while helping others who faced similar threats. In June 2020, 1 year after her disappearance, a memorial was installed in the park where she was last seen. A small marble plaque displayed her portrait with the inscription, "In memory of a radiant soul who will forever remain in our hearts, may her story inspire us to protect one another." Visitors often decorated the site with flowers or candles, creating a place of quiet reflection. Her family also established the Ellie Wyke Memorial Fund, which supports victims of stalking. The foundation offered legal guidance, counseling services, plus financial assistance. Funding came from annual community events such as marathons, auctions, or benefit concerts. At the college where Ellie studied, a scholarship for graphic design students was established in her name. It supported talented artists who shared Ellie's passion for creativity. Each year, during the award ceremony, Ellie's parents delivered heartfelt speeches about her dreams and the lasting influence she left behind. Ellie's story spread far beyond her hometown. Her name became linked with new efforts to combat stalking nationwide. Documentaries, podcasts, plus written features chronicled her case, encouraging the public to recognize early warning signs of danger and seek help before it was too late. Years after the tragedy, the Wake family slowly found the strength to move forward while keeping Ellie's memory alive. They remembered her as a warm, vibrant young woman whose presence uplifted those around her. Their advocacy efforts helped raise public awareness about stalking, along with the urgent need to support individuals facing similar threats. Ellie's story became a powerful reminder of how one life can leave a lasting imprint on the world. Her memory survives in the hearts of those who loved her, in the laws now protecting countless others, plus in every person whose sense of security or hope has been renewed because of her legacy. She was 19 years old when she came south, carrying little more than hope, instability, and the belief that a different city might give her a different life. Morgan Bauer left Aberdeen, South Dakota, in February 2016 and made her way to Georgia, a teenager trying to outrun whatever had closed in around her back home. She was a young woman with limited money, uncertain housing, and no real safety net waiting for her when she arrived. In situations like hers, danger can arise from isolation, not just violence. Morgan had flown into the Atlanta area in mid-February 2016, according to later case summaries, and moved between temporary places to stay, including contacts she had met online and hotels that could only hold her for so long. In those first days, Morgan was still visible. She was speaking to friends. She was active online. She was leaving a trail. Then the pattern broke. Her family noticed it first. The calls stopped. Her social media activity went quiet. For a young woman who had continued checking in, the silence was wrong enough to feel immediate. Investigators later said that her digital timeline had to be revisited, with evidence indicating that the last social media activity may have occurred on February 26, 2016, not February 25 as earlier believed. That small correction changed the edges of the case. It also sharpened one brutal fact: there was a final window in which Morgan was alive, moving through Georgia, and close to whoever would become central to her disappearance. For years, this was all anyone had: a teenager who arrived in a city of strangers, a life already unstable, and then an abrupt erasure. No confirmed rescue. Nobody. No courtroom ending. Only a family forced to imagine the worst while trying not to. In the background, barely understood at the time, were the people and places that would one day drag the case out of the dark. Atlanta did not know Morgan Bauer. And that, investigators would later understand, was part of the danger. In February 2016, she moved through the city quietly, without anchors. According to case records and investigative reporting, Morgan had no permanent residence. She relied on short-term arrangements, people she had recently met, temporary stays, and unstable living conditions that shifted from day to day. Each move distanced her further from anyone who might notice something was wrong in time. Witness accounts suggest she spent time in and around DeKalb County, later Newton County. The details are fragmented, drawn from interviews, digital traces pieced together after she disappeared. There were acquaintances, some barely known. There were rides, brief connections, and places where she stayed only briefly. In hindsight, investigators would describe this period as critical, a narrowing funnel where her world became smaller, more isolated, more dependent on the people immediately around her. Morgan had come to Georgia with the intention of starting over. But the reality she encountered was harsher. According to investigators, she may have been exposed to individuals involved in the use of banned substances and other high-risk behavior. Some reports suggest she was vulnerable, possibly exploited, though certain elements remain not yet officially confirmed. What is clear is that she was no longer moving freely through safe, predictable environments. She was moving within someone else's territory. Evidence later indicated that Morgan's last confirmed movements placed her in the Porterdale area, a small town in Newton County, far from the crowded anonymity of Atlanta. It was quieter there, more contained. A place where strangers stand out, but where events can also go unnoticed behind closed doors. During this time, Morgan's communication dropped sharply. Calls were missed. Messages unanswered. The silence was not gradual, it was abrupt. For investigators, that shift would later mark a critical deviation point, the moment her situation likely changed from unstable to dangerous. Family members, sensing something was wrong, began reaching out repeatedly. When there was no response, concern escalated into alarm. A missing person report followed, but by then, Morgan had already slipped beyond immediate reach. The people who had last seen her became central to the investigation, but at that stage, their roles were unclear, their stories incomplete. For weeks, investigators had almost nothing. No confirmed witnesses who could anchor Morgan Bauer's final movements. No surveillance footage placing her clearly in a specific location. No physical evidence pointing to violence. The case drifted in that danger space where a missing person can simply disappear into the noise of a large state, leaving behind only fragments and assumptions. Then the digital trail began to speak. According to investigators, Morgan had been active on social media in the days leading up to her disappearance. At first, the timeline seemed straightforward. Her last known activity was believed to be February 25, 2016. But as detectives revisited the data, something shifted. A closer forensic review suggested activity may have continued into February 26. That single-day difference mattered. It extended the window. It placed Morgan alive longer than originally believed, and closer in time to the individuals she had been with. The turning point came through images. Photos associated with Morgan's accounts began to circulate during the investigation. Some were ordinary, snapshots of a young woman navigating a new city. But others raised questions. The backgrounds, the people nearby, the subtle details embedded in each frame, investigators treated them not as memories, but as evidence. Every object, every shadow, every reflection became part of a larger puzzle. One image in particular drew attention. According to the reporting, it appeared to place Morgan in a setting that investigators would later connect to individuals in Newton County. The image did not show violence. It did not reveal a crime in progress. But it hinted at proximity, at who she was with, and where she might have been during those final hours. Digital evidence expanded beyond images. Phone data, message logs, and account activity were analyzed in layers. Investigators attempted to reconstruct her final communications, who she spoke to, when she stopped responding, and whether anyone else may have accessed her accounts after she vanished. Some details remained uncertain, not yet officially confirmed. But a pattern was emerging. Morgan's world had narrowed to a small circle of people, and that circle was now under scrutiny. For the first time, the case began to shift from a disappearance into something more defined. And at the center of that timeline were individuals who had seen Morgan in those final hours, people whose names would soon move from the margins of the investigation to its core. The images had done something critical. They had given investigators direction. And direction, in a case like this, changes everything. Time did not bring clarity. It brought weight. By mid-2016, Morgan Bauer's disappearance had already begun to settle into a familiar and devastating pattern, one where leads faded, memories blurred, and the urgency of the first days gave way to a slower, grinding search for answers. For her family, the absence became a constant presence. For investigators, the case remained open, but fragile, built on fragments that refused to fully connect. In the years that followed, there were moments of movement, but no resolution. Tips came in. Some were credible. Many were not. Each one had to be checked, each one carrying the possibility, however small, that it might lead to Morgan. According to investigators, resources were committed across jurisdictions, with local law enforcement and federal agencies working to track down every viable lead. But without a body, without definitive physical evidence, the case hovered in uncertainty. Morgan's family refused to let it disappear. They spoke publicly. They pushed for attention. They kept her name alive in a system that often moves on too quickly. Missing person posters circulated. Media coverage resurfaced at intervals. Each new article, each renewed appeal, was both hope and pain. Meanwhile, the investigation evolved quietly behind the scenes. Detectives returned to the beginning. They re-examined timelines. They revisited interviews with people who had last seen Morgan. Statements were compared again, looking for inconsistencies, for details that might have seemed insignificant at first but now carried new weight. In long-term cases, truth often emerges not from new evidence, but from a deeper understanding of old evidence. For years, the case remained unsolved. There was no confirmed location, no body recovered, and no trial. Just silence. By 2023, the pressure to solve the case would finally lead to a breakthrough. It wouldn't be from a tip or a confession, but from a search that would reveal the truth. In 2023, after 7 years of uncertainty, the case shifted from absence to evidence. It began with a search warrant. Investigators, having spent years revisiting timelines and re-examining relationships tied to Morgan Bauer's final known movements, focused their attention on a specific property in Porterdale, Newton County. This was not a random location. According to investigative records, it was connected to individuals who had already surfaced in earlier stages of the case, names that had lingered at the edges but never fully resolved into answers. When authorities moved onto the property, it marked the first decisive physical action in years. The search was methodical. Ground was examined. Structures were inspected. Every inch was treated as potential evidence. For investigators, this was the moment where theory had to meet reality. Human remains were recovered from the property. According to officials, those remains were later identified as Morgan Bauer. The identification transformed the case immediately. What had been a missing person investigation became a confirmed homicide investigation. For Morgan's family, the news carried a devastating duality. After years of not knowing, they finally had an answer. But it was the answer they had feared all along. For investigators, the recovery did more than confirm her death. It validated the direction the case had taken. The focus on individuals in Newton County was no longer speculative, it was grounded in physical evidence. The property itself became central, not just as a location, but as a seam tied directly to the final outcome of Morgan's life. Details surrounding the condition of the remains and the exact circumstances of her death were not fully disclosed publicly at that stage. Some aspects, according to case filings, remained part of the ongoing investigation and future prosecution. But the shift was undeniable. Shortly after the discovery, arrests followed. Authorities named 2 individuals connected to the property and to Morgan's final known movements. Their roles, their motives, the sequence of events that led to Morgan's death would become the next layer of the investigation, one that moved from search to prosecution. After 7 years, the investigation shifted. It was no longer focused on Morgan's current location, but on the crime committed against her and the identity of the perpetrator. With the discovery in Porterdale, the investigation moved with a clarity it had not possessed in years. Names that had once existed in the background were now brought forward: Jonathan Alexander Warren and Caitlin Goebel. According to official statements and court records, both were connected to the property where Morgan Bauer's remains were found, and both had ties to her final known movements in early 2016. For investigators, the focus shifted from locating Morgan to reconstructing what had happened in those final hours. Jonathan Warren emerged as the central figure. Reports described him as someone who had been in close proximity to Morgan during the last confirmed period of her life. His background, examined through investigative files and later court proceedings, revealed instability and patterns of behavior that drew scrutiny. Detectives began to piece together a timeline that placed Morgan inside an environment controlled not by chance, but by the people around her. Caitlin Goebel's role, according to the prosecution, was intertwined with Warren's. While details varied across filings and some aspects remained contested or not yet officially confirmed at that stage, authorities alleged that both individuals were present during critical moments connected to Morgan's disappearance and death. The case narrative, as outlined by investigators, suggested that Morgan had entered a situation she could not safely leave. What happened next was reconstructed through a combination of witness statements, forensic findings, and the physical evidence recovered at the Porterdale property. According to court documents, Morgan was killed shortly after arriving in that environment. The exact sequence, how events escalated, whether there was premeditation, and the roles each individual played became central questions for prosecutors. There were also elements that complicated the case. Some reports referenced unusual claims and alleged behaviors surrounding the suspects, details that drew media attention but required careful handling in court. Judges would later weigh what evidence could be admitted, ensuring that only substantiated, relevant facts shaped the legal outcome. January 2024. Inside a Georgia courtroom, the years of silence narrowed into a single moment. Jonathan Alexander Warren did not go to trial. Instead, he entered a guilty plea, formally admitting to killing Morgan Bauer and concealing her body. The decision avoided a prolonged courtroom battle, but it also meant that many details would surface not through dramatic testimony, but through structured legal disclosures and agreed facts between prosecution and defense. According to prosecutors, the plea confirmed what investigators had reconstructed over time. Morgan arrived in Georgia in February 2016, vulnerable and without stable support. Within days, she encountered Warren and entered an environment that would become her last known location. The timeline, once fragmented, was now anchored by admission. Court records indicated that Morgan was killed shortly after being with Warren in Newton County. While not every step of the crime was publicly detailed, authorities stated that Warren was responsible not only for her death but also for the concealment of her remains on the Porterdale property. That concealment was critical. For 7 years, it had prevented recovery. It had a delayed classification of the case as a homicide. And it had forced investigators to work without the most essential form of evidence, a body. The guilty plea confirmed that this absence was not accidental. It was intentional. In court, the prosecution emphasized the brutality and finality of Warren's actions. They outlined how the investigation had gradually closed in, the re-examined timelines, the focus on Newton County, and the search warrant that led to the recovery of Morgan's remains in 2023. Each piece of evidence, once isolated, has now formed a coherent chain. The defense, in accepting the plea, avoided the risk of trial. There was no public cross-examination of witnesses. No extended forensic debate. Instead, the case resolved through acknowledgement, an admission that aligned with physical evidence already in hand. Warren was sentenced to life in prison. For the Morgan family, the hearing was not the moment the matter was closed. There was no restoration, no undoing. But there was certainty. After years of living in ambiguity, of not knowing where she was, what had happened, or whether she might still be alive, they were finally given a confirmed narrative, however painful. Yet even in that courtroom, not everything was answered. Some aspects of Morgan's final hours remained unclear in public records. Certain details, according to legal filings, were either not fully disclosed or were reserved within investigative documentation. And alongside Warren's conviction, the legal process involving Caitlin Goebel continued separately, leaving open questions about the full scope of involvement. What the guilty plea did provide was a line, clear and irreversible, between disappearance and truth. Morgan Bauer had not vanished into uncertainty. She had been killed, her body hidden, her absence prolonged by deliberate action. And it took nearly 8 years for that truth to be spoken aloud, in a courtroom, by the man responsible. The courtroom brought answers. But it did not bring everything back. After Jonathan Warren's guilty plea and life sentence, the case of Morgan Bauer moved from investigation into aftermath, a quieter phase, but no less heavy. The facts had been established. The central question, what happened to Morgan, had been answered in legal terms. Yet the emotional and social impact of the case extended far beyond the verdict. For Morgan's family, the resolution came with a paradox. For nearly 8 years, they had lived in uncertainty. That uncertainty had its own kind of pain, one defined by unanswered calls, by imagining possibilities, by holding on to hope even when hope became fragile. The recovery of Morgan's remains in 2023 ended that ambiguity. The guilty plea in 2024 confirmed the truth. But certainty carries its own weight. It replaces questions with realities that cannot be softened. They now knew where she had been. They now knew what had been done. And now they have to live with that reality. Publicly, the case also left behind unresolved threads. Caitlin Goebel's legal situation, as reported, remained ongoing at the time, with proceedings continuing to determine her level of involvement. What she knew, what she did, and how the court would ultimately judge her role remained part of a parallel process, one that could further shape the full narrative of Morgan's final hours. There were also questions that may never be fully answered. Even when investigations succeed, they don't always uncover every detail. We may never know exactly what happened inside the Porterdale property before Morgan's death, her attempts to escape, or the specific interactions between the people there. Some of what really happened is only known by those who were there, and they may never tell the whole story. But the case leaves something else behind, something broader. Morgan Bauer's story is not only about a crime. It is about vulnerability. About how quickly isolation can become dangerous when a young person enters an unfamiliar environment without protection. It is about how exploitation can hide in plain sight, especially when someone is disconnected from support systems that might otherwise intervene. This case highlights the importance of persistence. It wasn't solved easily or quickly, and the investigation took many years of review and patience. Both the investigators and Morgan's family refused to give up and let the case go cold. Ultimately, justice was served, but it was delayed, and this delay is also a significant part of the story. Morgan Bauer was 19 years old. She left home looking for something better. What she found instead was a chain of events that ended her life and left her family searching for nearly a decade. The echoes of the case still resonate in the questions it raises, in the lessons it offers, and in the silent reminder of how easily a person can disappear when the world stops paying attention. And how long can it take to bring them back into the light? By the summer of 2016, Annie Hester's life in Gresham, Oregon, seemed to have found peace after years of divorce. But one June night, that peace was torn apart. When police arrived at the scene, they were confronted with a scene so horrific that it stunned even seasoned investigators. The front door was wide open. The belongings hadn't been rummaged through, but on the floor were long streaks of blood leading to Annie's body. Stabbed more than 60 times, with many wounds so deep they nearly severed her head. On her shoulder, the killer had carved the letters VXV, a strange sign that no one understood as a message, a symbol, or a challenge. The investigation quickly ruled out robbery or random attack. The crime scene revealed a carefully planned crime, driven by cold hatred and jealousy. What haunted the police most was the way the killer had broken in. Only someone who was too familiar with the apartment could have done so. So who killed Annie Hester? Why did a gentle, hard-working mother who devoted herself to her daughter have to die in such extreme pain? Annie Hester spent her entire life in Gresham, Oregon. Her childhood was difficult. When she was a teenager, her father died, and she relied on her mother and stepfather to get through. Despite the loss, Annie stayed close to her family and remained resilient. Friends and acquaintances describe Annie as trustworthy and determined. She is hardworking, has leadership qualities, and those qualities are reflected in every aspect of life. Her greatest joy, though, came from games. She loved role-playing adventures and cosplay festivals, and was a familiar face at local game shops. In the community of people with similar interests, Annie met Matthew Hester again. They had first met in 1999, when Matthew was married to someone else. Years passed, and they went their separate ways. Then, by chance, they met again at a local game store. This time, Matthew was divorced. From that meeting, they started dating and got married in 2008. In 2011, their daughter, Alice, was born. Annie was overjoyed, but the happiness didn't last. Just 1 year later, Matthew made the very mistake that had ruined his previous marriage: infidelity. Annie tried to forgive him, but the trust was gone. After more lies and broken promises, Annie made a hard choice. She filed for divorce and started over as a single mother. She and Alice moved into a small one-bedroom apartment. Annie gave Alice the bedroom and slept on a mattress in the living room. Annie worked tirelessly. During the day, she cared for children in an after-school program. At night, she worked at a downtown call center. Her dedication paid off, and she eventually became a manager. Still, the long hours took a toll, and Matthew's child support was inconsistent because he frequently changed jobs. Even so, she persevered to ensure that her daughter Alice had everything she needed, even when Matthew remarried. To a woman named Angela, Annie remained polite. The two families occasionally dined together or took Alice out. Annie has always been creative and appreciative of the little things. During Christmas, she made her own decorations and designed cards with Alice's face for her family. On weekends, when Alice was with her father, Annie took on extra work, often painting faces at local events. For her, staying busy was both a way to make a living and a way to express herself. She bore everything with a quiet strength. In the summer of 2016, that strength was tested by a terrible tragedy. One night, police were called to Annie's apartment in Gresham, Oregon. What they found shocked even experienced investigators. The intruder did not enter through the front door, but through Alice's bedroom window. The window air conditioner had been ripped out, and a block was used to push it open. When police arrived, The front door was unlocked. Inside, the apartment was largely undisturbed. No ransacking. No missing items. Suggesting robbery wasn't the motive. Blood evidence revealed a brutal attack. Annie was likely asleep when her killer struck. She tried to flee toward the front door but didn't make it. She suffered more than 60 stab wounds, many to her chest and head. The assailant even attempted to decapitate her. On her shoulder, someone had carved 3 letters, VXV. No one knew what they meant. Message, symbol, or a taunt to mislead investigators. 3 knives were found on the carpet, some from Annie's kitchen, and 1 folding knife likely brought by the attacker. Bloody shoe prints led toward the exit. Detectives questioned whether there had been one attacker or more. Alice was safe. She had been staying with Matthew and Angela that night. Had she been home, she might also have been attacked. Neighbors reported disturbing sounds, screams and crashing around 11:15 p.m. Later, loud arguments, slamming doors, and groans that continued past 1 o'clock. AWS. One neighbor turned up the TV to drown out the noise. No one called for help. Only one person finally did. The victim herself, Annie. At 3 a.m. gasping for breath and barely able to speak, she managed to dial 911. It was a final act of desperation from a woman fighting for her life. From the first sounds neighbors reported around 11 p.m. to the moment Annie called for help, nearly 4 hours passed. Investigators found this deeply alarming. It implied the attack was not brief but prolonged, cruel, and essentially torture. They needed answers, but there were no suspects, no clear motive, and no explanation for the strange VXV symbol carved into Annie's body. The only thing certain, someone was determined to kill her. Police first focused on those closest to Annie. The police contacted Annie's ex-husband, Matthew Hester, and his current wife, Angela, to inform them of Annie's death and invite them to the station. Investigators needed to know about any tension, threats, or disputes. Matthew claimed that Annie had no enemies, that their relationship, though distant, was stable, and that his main concern was the safety of their daughter, Alice. He said he and Angela had been home all night with Alice and Angela's 3 children. They played video games and went to bed around 10 p.m. He claimed Angela was beside him the entire time, and she confirmed it. Angela added that she's a light sleeper and would have noticed if Matthew left during the night. However, detectives took note of Matthew's demeanor. He seemed largely unaffected by the violent death of his ex-wife, Annie. He focused on custody issues and Alice's future and described his feelings toward Annie as mostly indifferent, wanting minimal contact with her. Matthew admitted to having an affair during the marriage, but said they had an open arrangement. According to him, Annie also explored polyamory, including a relationship with a couple she met at a pirate-themed role-playing event. Investigators located the couple and cleared them of involvement. Matthew's physical condition also raised questions. He used a cane, walked with a limp, and had obvious health issues. Given the brutality of the crime, more than 60 stab wounds, detectives doubted whether he could have carried out the attack alone. Angela was questioned separately and repeated the story. The 2 of them went to bed at 10 o'clock, scrolled through their phones, and then fell asleep. The house was always noisy. 4 children, a dog, and a tenant in the garage. Angela's best friend, Karina, who was renting the garage, said she was sure Matthew and Angela were home all night. Karina said she would have heard if a car left the driveway. Both Matthew and Angela voluntarily surrendered their phones, and nothing incriminating was found at that time. With no solid evidence, they were released. Meanwhile, investigators expanded the search. Teams combed the brush along the Springwater Trail with dogs and helicopters. The area had a notorious reputation for crime and illicit substances, causing concern among residents. Many people assumed Annie might have met a dangerous vagrant. But the deeper we delve into Annie's life and her custody battle with Matthew, the less convincing this theory became. Co-parenting had deteriorated, particularly after Angela entered Matthew's life. Angela quickly went from rumor to lover, and tensions with Annie escalated. Angela reportedly didn't want Matthew communicating with Annie, and Matthew pushed for full custody of Alice. The dispute went to court. 1 month before Annie's murder, the court awarded full custody of Alice to Annie. Matthew was ordered to pay more than $13,000 in back child support and nearly $30,000 in legal fees. Neither Matthew nor Angela was employed. The financial pressure and the personal stakes were immense, and Annie had won. Detectives had a pressing question. How would Matthew and Angela pay? Matthew spent most of his time at home, writing fantasy fiction and designing elaborate role-playing games. He and Angela also ran a small YouTube channel sharing his fictional worlds. However, the reality was that they owed Annie thousands of dollars in child support and court fees. While having virtually no income, they explained that they were full-time caregivers for their children, claiming that their children had mental health issues that warranted government benefits and financial assistance. Angela's ex-husband, Aaron, told investigators that her fixation on diagnosing and medicating children had contributed to their divorce. According to Aaron, Angela often insisted her kids needed prescription drugs even when doctors disagreed. Behavior he viewed as dangerous and unnecessary. He also said Angela's attention later turned to Alice, Annie's daughter. Angela became convinced Alice was bipolar, a claim Annie vehemently denied. Annie feared Angela might try to use Alice's name and alleged condition to obtain additional benefits. Experts later validated Annie's concerns. A licensed psychologist explained that labeling normal developmental behaviors as mental illnesses was harmful, and there was no formal diagnostic criteria for bipolar disorder in children under 6. Tensions escalated when Child Protective Services received a report that Annie was neglecting her daughter, Alice. She didn't know who made the call and was devastated. The case was quickly dismissed as unfounded, but the emotional impact was severe. In an email to a friend, she wrote painfully that she did not understand and asked why she had to endure all that. The motives were clear to investigators: child custody, jealousy, and money. 3 powerful reasons. Matthew and Angela could have wanted Annie gone, but motive alone wasn't enough. They still lacked hard evidence. The detectives brought Matthew and Angela back for more questioning. Matthew surprised them by taking off his shirt voluntarily, showing no cuts or scratches. Because Annie fought so hard for her life, detectives believe the killer may have been injured. Matthew insisted he had nothing to hide. He admit people may suspect him, but denies any involvement in Annie's death. Angela was mostly silent, bowing her head and complaining of fatigue. However, she gave new details that contradicted her previous testimony. She now said that around 3 a.m., on the night of the murder, she had been awake. She took the dogs outside and suddenly became violently ill, so ill that Matthew had to help her shower and change clothes. This new story put both of them awake and active at the same time. Annie called 911. With no solid evidence, the detectives had to release Matthew and Angela again. But this time, they began secret surveillance. What they found was troubling. Footage showed Matthew moving easily, carrying heavy shopping bags, doing yard work, and walking without a cane. His apparent frailty during interrogation seemed staged. Worse, a neighbor's security camera recorded a vehicle leaving Matthew and Angela's driveway shortly before 1 a.m. Heading toward Annie's apartment. Their housemate, Karina, who slept in the garage, had told police she hadn't heard anything. Detectives now wondered if she was protecting them. Contradictions mounted. Matthew and Angela had lied, and their claims of innocence were falling apart. A year on, Annie's family is still waiting for answers. The brutality of her murder made silence unbearable. A reward was offered for information that could bring justice. Months later, the case remained unsolved. Annie's killer was still at large. The pain her family suffered was immeasurable. Her mother later said she would never want another parent to go through the same agony. The grief, the unanswered questions, and Annie's absence left wounds that would not heal. Public appeals followed. Police urged anyone with information to come forward, stressing that the perpetrator had to be found. For Annie's family, justice was the only path to peace. Meanwhile, Matthew and Angela quietly moved nearly 700 miles away, making it more difficult for them to cooperate in the investigation. But the detectives did not give up. Then came the turning point. DNA samples from the knives seized at the scene were tested. The results were undeniable. Blood and DNA matched Angela. In October 2017, more than a year after Annie's murder, police located Angela in Pocatello, Idaho. She was arrested on 2 counts of aggravated murder and 1 count of first-degree theft. When arrested, Angela flew into a rage, screaming that she had young children at home and demanding answers. Detectives stood firm. She was charged with intentionally killing Annie, and prosecutors added an additional charge, alleging torture. If convicted, Angela faced life in prison, and at that time, possibly the death penalty. She pleaded not guilty, insisting she was innocent despite mounting evidence. Detectives then turned to Matthew. They showed him Annie's autopsy photos, hoping to break his ice. At first, Matthew denied any involvement. He later admitted Angela came home the night of the murder covered in blood. He claimed she was panicking, and that he only helped her clean up. He said he didn't know what she had done, though he also acknowledged that he and Angela had previously discussed killing Annie. Matthew then tried to shift blame to Angela's ex-husband, Aaron. Detectives thoroughly questioned Aaron but found no evidence linking him to the crime. He was never charged. Court records reveal the chilling details of the charges against Angela: stabbing Annie more than 60 times, attempting to decapitate her, and carving VXV into her skin. It was a crime defined by rage and cruelty. The strongest incriminating evidence came from her Google Maps search history. 3 days after the murder, Angela looked up a spot in Mount Hood National Forest. Detectives went there and found a boot buried near a tree. It matched a bloody shoe print at the scene. A diver later recovered a plastic bag nearby containing Angela's clothing. The fabric pattern, size, and purchase history directly linked her. The evidence was overwhelming. As investigators dug deeper, they found another disturbing detail. Annie had a $100,000 life insurance policy, naming her parents as beneficiaries. Shortly after her death, someone called the insurance company, not her parents, but Matthew, asking if he could receive the payout. When told no information could be provided, he hung up. By 2019, prosecutors expanded the case. Matthew was charged with 2 counts of conspiracy to commit murder, 1 count of solicitation to commit murder, and 1 count of hindering prosecution. He pleaded not guilty, like Angela, but the evidence grew. In 2020, Angela changed her plea and admitted to second-degree murder. Oregon law had changed by then, eliminating the possibility of the death penalty. But she was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Matthew's case concluded later. In 2021, he pleaded guilty to soliciting Angela's brother to commit murder and to hindering prosecution. His sentence was considered light, given the severity of the case. Just 56 months. Less than 5 years. Many criticized the outcome, but prosecutors called it strategic. If stronger evidence later emerged against Matthew, they could still prosecute him for conspiracy to commit murder. If he was acquitted, that would not be possible. Angela and Matthew divorced while incarcerated. Angela has not spoken publicly about Annie since her arrest. Angela's child was placed in foster care, and Alice was adopted by Annie's mother. Alice finally found the safety and love in the family Annie had always wanted for her. Those who had worked with Annie remembered her not only as a victim, she was an inspiration, a tireless worker who shouldered many hardships, yet still brought joy to others. Her positivity, even in her darkest moments, left a lasting mark. In her final moments, Annie reflected what she always embodied: strength, resilience, and a fierce will to fight. The night in Swindon was calm, but that tranquility was soon shattered. A young woman named Cian Emma O'Callaghan, known for being quiet and kind, stepped out of a familiar bar and disappeared without a trace. There were no witnesses, no sounds of distress, and no leads to follow. Only the footage of her last moments remained, followed by an unsettling silence that left many questions unanswered. In a town where people believed nothing bad could happen, Cian's disappearance turned life upside down. Her friends were frantic, families were devastated, and the police found themselves caught off guard by a search that would evolve into a prolonged nightmare, revealing the chilling reality behind a seemingly ordinary man. As the smallest details began to emerge, the police realized they were no longer dealing with a simple missing person case. They were confronting a dark reality that had long been lurking beneath the surface. Cian Emma O'Callaghan was born on June 3, 1988, in Swindon, Wiltshire, and grew up in a close-knit family. After her parents separated, she lived with her mother, Elaine Pickford, and took care of her younger siblings Liam, Laura, and Aidan. Those who know Cian describe her as kind, thoughtful, and always willing to help others. She avoids trouble and conflict, and her friends admire her for being a good listener, bringing peace to their lives. She longs for a simple life with a stable job, a home of her own, and eventually a family. After graduating, Cian realized that the traditional academic path wasn't for her. She decided to work in the administrative department of a local business and quickly established herself as a responsible and dedicated person. She was known for being the first to arrive and the last to leave. Cian had a stable personal life. She lived with her boyfriend, Kevin Reap, 26. In the suburbs of central Swindon, Kevin worked in information technology. They often had gatherings with friends and family, and occasionally went on holidays to the coast. In recent weeks, her life had been normal work, time with friends, and weekend outings. Everything seemed peaceful and safe. Swindon, like many other English towns, had a slow and familiar pace of life. Neighbors were generally friendly, shops closed early, and the streets were quiet after nightfall. Such a peaceful setting seemed unlikely for anything shocking to occur. On the evening of March 18, 2011, Cian went out with friends to Suju, a club in downtown Swindon. The night was typical, filled with music, dancing, and chatting. Surveillance footage shows them entering the club just before midnight. At 2:52 a.m., Cian leaves alone, telling her friends she is walking home. Her apartment, shared with Kevin, is about half a mile away. Cameras capture her walking down the street and turning a corner. But then she disappears from view. That is the last confirmed sighting of her. From that moment, there are no more leads. Kevin attempts to contact her several times by phone but gets no reply. Assuming she is still out with friends, he goes to bed. By morning, it becomes clear that she never returned home. After several unsuccessful attempts to reach her, Kevin calls the police to report her missing at 9:45 a.m. On March 19, officers begin searching the area where Cian was last seen. Unbeknownst to them, these first hours would prove crucial in what would become one of Swindon's most high-profile cases. On the morning of March 19, 2011, less than 6 hours after Cian went missing, the Wiltshire police made their first official response. A specialized investigation unit was quickly formed, consisting of missing persons officers, surveillance analysts, and forensic teams, all tasked with tracing Cyan's steps from the moment she left the club to her expected home arrival. Officers began scouring shops along High Street, collecting video footage, and interviewing staff. The footage clearly captured Cyan leaving the club and walking alone. But she never appeared on the next camera in the sequence. The distance between those two locations was short, but 32 minutes later, her phone signaled from a location nearly 12 meters away, near the Savernake Forest. This detail is suspicious because it's highly unlikely Cyan could have moved to that location in such a short amount of time. By midday, police leaders had issued their first public statement on the investigation, led by Chief Inspector Steve Fulcher. He appealed to the public for information, emphasizing that the incident could involve a serious threat. At the same time, searches began in the area several miles around the club and the roads leading out of Swindon. Many volunteers began arriving in town, printing and distributing flyers with Cyan's picture at bus stops, shops, and in cars. By nightfall, several hundred community members joined the search, and within 24 hours, nearly 400 people were working alongside the police. On March 20, an anonymous benefactor offered a £20,000 reward for any information that could help find Cyan. Law enforcement increased patrols, set up temporary headquarters, and launched a hotline. However, investigators faced numerous difficulties. The camera network had only captured part of Cyan's route. There were no witnesses, no signs of a struggle, and no personal items were found. The only lead was Cyan's phone, which had gone silent. The town was filled with anxious anticipation, as reporters gathered in Swindon's main square and national television began broadcasting daily updates. With media pressure increasing, rumors began to circulate, ranging from a robbery gone wrong to theories about Cyan running away. Her family and friends spoke out to refute these claims. Her boyfriend, Kevin, appeared on camera, urgently appealing for her safe return. Authorities worked to control the flow of information, but attention was rapidly growing. For a town like Swindon, known for its tranquility and safety, this situation was shocking. Within hours, it became the center of a national investigation. With each passing hour without answers, anxiety escalated. By the end of the first 24 hours, detectives possessed only fragments of information: a possible route, a time frame, and the last known location of Cyan's phone. The rest remained a mystery, while the public remained hopeful that Cyan would return home safely. Investigators started to realize that the situation might be more complicated than just a missing persons case. A few days after Cyan's disappearance, the investigation made a significant breakthrough. After reviewing hours of city surveillance footage, detectives noticed something unusual. A dark Toyota Avensis appeared in the area where Cyan was last tracked. The timestamp matched the time Cyan left the center of Swindon. The vehicle slowed down, stopped briefly, and then continued toward the Eastern Highway. This became a crucial lead for investigators. Running the license plates linked the car to Christopher Halliwell, a 47-year-old resident of Swindon. He was listed as a licensed taxi driver with a mostly clean record. Aside from a few minor infractions, he seemed like an ordinary person, working nights, living with his partner, Heather, and raising 3 sons. Neighbors and colleagues described him as quiet and reliable. However, nothing about him immediately aroused suspicion. Police brought Christopher in for questioning. He claimed that on the night Cyan went missing, he worked until around 1:30 a.m. before heading home. However, surveillance footage showed his car in the same streets where Cyan was last seen. When officers pointed this out, Christopher began to change his story, stumbling over his timeline and eventually suggesting he might have just been passing through. Despite these inconsistencies, there was no direct evidence linking him to any crime. There were no signs of a struggle, and no items belonging to Cyan were found in his car, leaving police with no choice but to let him go. However, Detective Superintendent Steve Fulcher had a strong feeling that Christopher wasn't merely a bystander. The inconsistencies in his story and his nervous demeanor raised significant red flags. As a result, the investigative team decided to proceed with covert surveillance. Christopher was placed under constant observation, documenting every move, interaction, and stop. His phone was tapped, and a GPS tracker was secretly installed on his car. For several days, Christopher's routine appeared normal as he went to work, filled up on gas, and did some shopping. But this normality started to raise concerns for investigators, as he seemed overly cautious, avoiding conversations and taking unfamiliar routes as if aware he was being watched. The surveillance operation continued, with detectives closely tracking Christopher's movements. On March 24, 2011, he left his home in his Toyota Avensis, stopping at a gas station to refuel. He drove to the outskirts of Swindon and into a rural area without cameras. He parked his car near a wooded area, removed a bundle from the trunk, and laid out the fabric seat covers on the ground. He soaked them in gasoline and set them on fire, an act that was recorded on video by officers observing from a distance. The fire quickly consumed the material, leaving only ashes. This was a critical moment for investigators, as it clearly indicated an attempt to destroy evidence. They immediately ordered his arrest. Christopher was taken into custody in a supermarket parking lot shortly after returning from his trip. He did not resist, claiming he was merely changing the upholstery. He was brought directly to Detective Superintendent Steve Fulcher, who was leading the investigation. Normally, the suspect would be taken to the station and have the right to an attorney. But Steve knew they needed to act quickly to find Sian alive. He made a controversial choice to drive Christopher to the hills near Oxford to get him to talk. Inside the car, the conversation was tense. Steve made no threats or promises, but directly questioned Sian's whereabouts. After hours of silence, Christopher finally agreed to lead Steve to where her body was located. At this point, the investigation shifted from missing persons to a violent crime. Steve was aware that he was stepping outside standard procedures. There was no formal interview, no lawyer, and Christopher hadn't been taken to the station. However, he made that decision knowing that following protocol might have prevented Christopher from confessing. In the following hours, Steve continued to take the necessary steps for the arrest. However, these decisions, while bringing progress to the case, could potentially hinder his personal career. On March 24, 2011, following Christopher's confession, police units began moving east of Swindon toward Savernake Forest. Christopher indicated a small patch of ground near a rural road as the location of Sian M.O. Callahan's body. Detective Steve recorded the coordinates and notified his team. Forensic experts soon arrived, sealed off the area, set up portable lighting, and began their work immediately. They meticulously excavated the site layer by layer to preserve any evidence. After several hours, they found a human body partially wrapped in fabric just below the surface. Although formal identification would follow, the investigative team was absolutely convinced it was Sian. An autopsy performed by the Wiltshire Forensic Unit confirmed the cause of death. There were signs of trauma from a heavy object impacting the back of the head and several stab wounds on the body. There were no signs of serious assault, suggesting the attack was sudden and brief. Sian may have lost her life shortly after getting into the car. The atmosphere at the site was heavy with silence as the team worked, each member fully aware of the seriousness of the situation. For them, it was more than just another case. It was personal. Steve stood by quietly as the body was recovered from the ground, feeling justified in his earlier decision to bend protocol. Without that choice, they might never have located her. That evening, news breaks across the media. In Swindon, a public mourning begins as people gather outside Suju nightclub, where Sian was last seen alive. They leave flowers and light candles at the entrance, and heartfelt messages appear along the railings. For this small, quiet town, It's a tragedy. The story of a young woman who disappeared just minutes from home has a heartbreaking conclusion. Police confirm that the body found is Sian Emma O'Callaghan, 22, a local resident. The investigation now shifts focus. It's no longer a missing persons case but a major crime investigation. Christopher Halliwell is arrested, and Detective Steve prepares to document the confession that became a key breakthrough in the case. Savernake Forest, previously just a beautiful area, now symbolizes loss. The location where a young woman's life ended and where a significant investigation began. When the investigative team realized the seriousness of the situation, Christopher told Detective Steve that there was another body. He didn't name it, only saying that the incident had happened a long time ago. Investigators quickly start searching a nearby area only a few hundred yards from where Sian was found. Forensic teams discover bones and clothing remnants. DNA testing confirms the remains belong to 20-year-old Becky Godden Edwards, who went missing 8 years prior in Swindon. At the time of her disappearance, there were no alarm bells. It was thought she had run away from home. Becky's story was tragic. During her teenage years, she battled addiction and was frequently in treatment. But one day, she left rehab and never returned. Over the years, she became unhoused and lived on the streets. Her mother, Karen Edwards, searched tirelessly for her, but every effort was in vain. Now police are telling her that Becky has been found. For Karen, the news is both heartbreaking and provides closure. After 8 years of uncertainty, forensic experts determine that Becky died due to violent actions, but the lengthy time since then means they cannot specify an exact cause. Christopher confessed to the crime, but could not recall the date or details of the incident. Investigators soon realized they were not facing an isolated case, but possibly a series of crimes involving one man. With 2 victims years apart, police began to review old missing persons cases for any connections to Christopher. For Becky's family, it marked the end of a long nightmare. For detectives, it shifted the focus from searching for one missing woman to investigating a potential serial offender. In the fall of 2012, Christopher Halliwell's trial took place at Bristol Crown Court, charged with the murder of Sian Emma O'Callaghan. Initially, he pleaded not guilty, but months later, he confessed. The jury accepted his confession, and on October 19, 2012, he was sentenced to life imprisonment, without parole for at least 25 years. However, the case concerning Becky did not proceed to court. Prosecutors chose not to use Christopher's confession due to legal procedural issues. Under UK law, any statement made without legal counsel present is considered inadmissible. Detective Steve Fulcher's decision to interrogate Christopher outside a police station without an attorney jeopardized the case, sparking a national debate about police practices and the rights of suspects. Despite this, the families of the victims supported Steve, crediting him for uncovering the truth. Steve himself faced an internal investigation and ultimately received a disciplinary warning, leading to his resignation from the police force. He sacrificed his position, career, and reputation. While his actions led to the discovery of both women's remains, public opinion was divided. Some argued that justice should supersede legal technicalities, while others believed Steve had set a dangerous precedent by disregarding established law. Meanwhile, Christopher, who was convicted of one crime, is still serving his sentence and remains silent regarding the second charge. It wasn't until 2016 that law enforcement reopened the trial thanks to additional evidence, including DNA analysis and materials from the crime scene. Prosecutors were able to reopen the case of Becky without needing a confession this time. The jury reviewed the evidence and delivered a clear verdict: guilty. On September 19, 2016, Christopher Halliwell was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, ensuring he would spend the rest of his life behind bars. The case, which began with the disappearance of a young woman in a quiet English town, ended with 2 life sentences, forever changing 2 lives. After the trials, The lives of those involved took different paths. Detective Steve Fulcher, whose efforts led to solving both cases, was found guilty of misconduct. His choice to question Christopher without an attorney present violated police investigative procedures. Consequently, Steve faced disciplinary measures, lost his rank, and resigned from the Wiltshire Police Department, ending a 20-year career where he had risen from patrol officer to lead investigator. This particular case, the C. Emma O'Callaghan case, ultimately cost him everything. After leaving the force, Steve moved to Somalia to work as a consultant for a private security firm. Ironically, his decision to break protocol was pivotal in solving crimes that could have remained unresolved. Without that bold, albeit improper, action, the victims might not have been discovered, and the perpetrator could have continued to harm others. Steve prioritized justice over procedure, and the victims' families did not turn against him. Cian's mother publicly thanked him for allowing them to say goodbye to her daughter. Karen Edwards, Becky Godden's mother, defended Steve as well, stating that without him, she would never have learned the truth about her daughter's fate. To them, he remained a hero despite the system's judgment. Meanwhile, Christopher continues to serve his life sentence. His name has become a symbol of one of the darkest cases in modern British history. This case has had a significant impact on the legal proceedings and public psychology, leading to many debates about the boundaries between what is legal and what is right. For the town of Swindon, where it all began, this story became a symbol of loss and broken trust, illustrating how quickly a familiar world can unravel. This narrative is not just about crime. It emphasizes the true cost of uncovering the truth. Some lost their lives, others lost their careers and reputations, but their actions ultimately provided answers that two families had desperately sought for years. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Orville Fleming. Sarah June Douglas was born on August 4, 1987 in Sacramento, California, into a family with 5 siblings. As a child, she was a sweet, sociable, and cheerful girl with a deep love for nature. She had a particular fondness for animals, especially dogs and birds, and enjoyed spending time in the garden planting and caring for plants. However, her teenage years marked a dramatic change. Sarah became rebellious and mischievous, dropped out of school, abandoned her previous hobbies, and began spending most of her time with friends and attending parties. At the age of 19, she entered into a tumultuous relationship with a man and eventually became pregnant. In 2007, at the age of 20, Sarah gave birth to a son. Unfortunately, the child's birth did not resolve the conflicts between Sarah and her boyfriend, and they eventually decided to separate. Sarah had to adapt to life as a single mother with no formal education or career while taking care of her child. Over time, making ends meet became increasingly difficult, as finding a steady job that could support both her and her son proved to be a challenge. Although her mother and sister provided some support, Sarah continued to struggle financially. Eventually, she turned to providing intimate services on escort websites. Her sister described Sarah as a good person who made poor decisions, and this was one of the worst. While Sarah was able to alleviate her financial difficulties, this choice also exposed her to new and far more dangerous problems. After spending a few years working in the escort industry, Sarah met Orville Fleming, who provided financial stability and a secure home. Wanting to ensure a better future for her son, Sarah saw Orville as the salvation she had been hoping for. Orville Fleming, born on June 26, 1958 in California, had lived what appeared to be an exemplary life for over 30 years. He was a husband, father, and a dedicated firefighter with over 24 years of service. Due to his outstanding performance and leadership skills, Orville became a battalion chief. Orville also worked as an instructor at the fire academy. His career was flourishing, and his impeccable record qualified him for a substantial pension. Many considered Orville and Megan Fleming, his wife, who had been married for 30 years, to be the epitome of a successful, typical American couple. Together, they raised 2 children who had grown into responsible, successful adults. However, behind his seemingly perfect life, Orville was hiding a dark secret. A significant portion of his income was spent on one of his private indulgences, hiring escort services that he found on internet platforms. Despite being seen as a devoted husband and a dedicated civil servant in his 50s, Orville sought out intimate encounters with young women. On one of these websites, Orville met Sarah, a 24-year-old attractive young woman. Orville was immediately drawn to her during their first meeting. At the time, Sarah was using a different name on the website and charging $300 an hour for her services. It is said that during their meetings, Sarah gained Orville's trust by sharing stories about her difficult life as a single mother. Moved by her struggles, their relationship quickly developed. Orville became deeply infatuated with Sarah, to the point of obsession. Orville continued to care for Sarah and her son, but he felt that it was not enough. After some time, he suggested that they move in together, promising to leave his wife, marry Sarah, and take care of her child. True to his word, Orville divorced his first wife, Megan, and moved in with Sarah and her son in a house located in a quiet neighborhood in Fox River, south of Sacramento. Sarah shared with her family how happy she was with the changes in her life. Although her parents were initially concerned about the significant age gap between Sarah and Orville, they supported her and believed she had made the right choice. The new house also became a home for birds, as Sarah had loved them since childhood and could now devote her time to caring for them. She had quit her previous job to focus on taking care of Orville and her son. Their plans for marriage began when Orville gave Sarah an engagement ring with a large diamond. However, their relationship soon began to deteriorate. Orville became possessive and extremely jealous. Knowing that Sarah was financially dependent on him, he used this to his advantage to control her and ensure she stayed by his side. After living together for 2 years, Sarah grew increasingly frustrated with her fiancé, who displayed obsessive and controlling behavior. She also frequently clashed with Megan, who was still Orville's legal wife despite him filing for divorce on October 24. Sarah's patience was wearing thin, and she began calling Megan repeatedly, even demanding that Megan pay off Orville's debt for the escort services Sarah claimed to have provided him. As 2014 approached, Orville and Sarah's relationship had deteriorated significantly. Sarah began spending more time with her mother and sister, confiding in them that she was seriously considering ending her relationship with Orville. Little did she know that her decision to leave would lead to a devastating tragedy. On Wednesday, April 30, 2014, Sarah sent her son to stay with his father for a few days and decided to spend time with her mother and sister. The 3 women went to a casino where they stayed until 11 p.m. During this time, Orville repeatedly called and texted Sarah. Around midnight, Sarah's sister dropped her off at the house she shared with Orville, not realizing it would be the last time she would see her sister alive. When Sarah entered the house, she immediately sensed something was wrong. A strong smell of gas filled the air. She quickly turned off the gas in the kitchen and called her sister, telling her that Orville had left the gas on, possibly in an attempt to harm her birds. While they were talking, Sarah's sister suddenly heard her scream, apparently startled by someone entering the room. Moments later, her sister heard Orville's voice, followed by the sound of arguing and Sarah's terrified scream. Thinking it was just another one of their usual arguments, her sister went to bed, planning to check on Sarah the next morning. The next morning, Sarah's sister tried calling her several times but received no response. At 8 a.m., Sarah's sister and aunt decided to go to her house. They knocked on the door, but no one answered. Noticing that the door was unlocked, they cautiously entered the living room, only to find the house in disarray, with objects scattered everywhere. Feeling uneasy, they went to the master bedroom. What they found there horrified them so much that they ran out of the house in a panic. A neighbor, alarmed by the screams of Sarah's sister and aunt, quickly called 911 to report the incident. By 9 a.m., the police had arrived at the scene. Inside, they immediately noticed signs of a struggle. In the bedroom, they found a body lying face down on the floor next to the bed. The victim had visible stab wounds, and a cloth-like material was tied around her neck. The window shutters were closed, and no one else was in the house. The police quickly secured the area, called in forensic experts to collect evidence, and transported the young woman's body to the morgue. Sarah's sister and aunt were questioned and promptly identified the victim as Sarah June Douglas, 26. An autopsy revealed that Sarah had been attacked with a knife, possibly a kitchen knife. There were also clear signs of strangulation on her neck, along with bruises on her body, which indicated physical violence. Laboratory tests found no traces of alcohol or foreign substances in her system. Police learned from Sarah's sister that she lived with Orville and that their relationship had recently become strained. That night, Sarah had allegedly told Orville that she intended to end the relationship. Using details Sarah's sister overheard during a phone call, police began reconstructing the events that led to Sarah's tragic death. Orville Fleming became the prime suspect in Sarah's murder, leading to an arrest warrant being issued against him. However, Orville disappeared, and efforts to locate him were unsuccessful. A statewide search was conducted, and his official vehicle was found not far from his home, but his whereabouts remained a mystery. During the investigation, police discovered that Orville was in possession of 2 handguns that were missing from the scene. As a result, they warned the public that he was considered armed and extremely dangerous. Flyers were widely distributed, urging people to report any suspicious individuals. The police search continued for several days, with special units involved. Meanwhile, at the house where Sarah had died, relatives, friends, and acquaintances gathered to pay their respects and offer condolences to her family. The media closely followed the search and provided regular updates. On May 2, the police decided to reenact the events of that tragic night. Orville's relatives and colleagues were invited to participate, and those who knew him were shocked by his alleged involvement in such a terrible crime. They had always known him to be a kind, positive, and cheerful person, which made the accusations even harder to believe. A week after Orville disappeared, he was removed from his post due to being absent from work for more than 5 days. Meanwhile, the police redirected their search to remote areas of California where Orville might have traveled. They speculated that, as a nature enthusiast who frequently hiked in hard-to-reach areas, Orville might possess survival skills suited to such environments. During the ongoing search, Orville's wife Megan made a startling revelation. She claimed that Orville and other members of the California Fire Department had used escort services at the fire station. Megan stated that she had seen a video showing firefighters with women, including one identified as Sarah, inside the station's fire truck. However, when police searched the home Orville and Sarah shared, they found no such videos or photos. Megan went on to report that Sarah had been demanding money from her for the past 4 years to pay debts related to intimate services. Megan claimed that the situation escalated after Sarah discovered that the diamond ring Orville had given her was, in fact, a fake. After 2 weeks of intensive searching, Orville, a former fire battalion commander, was finally arrested on May 26, 2014. He was found at a bus stop near the woods where he had abandoned his car, suggesting that he had been hiding in the woods the entire time. When he attempted to catch a bus to get food, he was arrested without resistance. On May 20, 2014, Orville Fleming appeared in court. He claimed that he could not afford a lawyer and refused to plead guilty. 10 days later, the California Highway Patrol announced an investigation into alleged misconduct involving members of the fire department where Orville had worked. In October 2014, 4 months after the murder, Orville formally pleaded not guilty. Sarah's family, particularly her mother, was outraged by Orville's arrogance, as he even winked at his lawyer while proclaiming his innocence. Her family informed the court about Sarah's troubled relationship with Orville, describing him as a jealous and controlling husband who had forbidden her from working. At the same time, an investigation was launched into the fire academy where Orville had been an instructor. On December 29, 2014, evidence of misconduct was uncovered, resulting in the suspension of 16 firefighters. In June 2015, Orville's lawyers began their defense by attempting to portray him in the best possible light. They argued that he was a victim of manipulation by an escort service employee with a history of substance abuse. The defense claimed that the woman had exploited Orville for her own benefit until he reached his breaking point. They also asserted that he had amnesia and could not recall the attack itself. Through this narrative, the defense hoped to secure a reduced sentence. The next day, Orville alleged that Sarah was an alcoholic, used illegal drugs, and frequently yelled at and humiliated him. On the night of the incident, he claimed they had a heated argument, after which he lost control. He stated that he went into the kitchen, grabbed a knife, returned to the room, pinned Sarah down on the bed, and stabbed and strangled her. Orville claimed he could not remember all the details of the incident and later expressed shock, saying he could not believe he had killed the woman he intended to marry. He also revealed that while on the run, he had attempted end life 3 times. Finally, the prosecutor presented their case. During questioning, Orville claimed he did not remember what had happened. However, the police had a recording from his arrest in which Orville clearly confessed that he had stabbed Sarah because she insulted him. The prosecution argued that Orville had sufficient time to comprehend his actions, making him eligible for first-degree murder charges. On June 24, 2015, Orville Fleming was convicted of second-degree murder. On July 31, he was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 16 years. Orville's crime not only deprived Sarah's 5-year-old son of the chance to grow up with his mother, but also exposed him to a media frenzy due to speculation about his mother's past. To shield the boy from public scrutiny and hostility, his father relocated him to Santa Rosa. Sarah's family suffered 2 devastating tragedies. First, Sarah's death shattered their hearts. Then, just months after Sarah's death, her brother, to whom she was very close, took his own life, unable to cope with the immense pain of losing her in such horrific circumstances. For Sarah's family, her death at the hands of a man she had been with for years was a stark warning to end abusive relationships before it was too late. It also highlighted that seemingly respectable and socially respected people can sometimes be far worse than those who are shunned. It was a sweltering night in Apopka, Florida. The sound of an ambulance siren woke neighbors, but no one knew what was going on. When police arrived, they found a woman sitting on her doorstep, covered in cuts and holding a blood-soaked towel against her chest. She told officers she had shot a man in self-defense. Inside the house, police discovered his body. He had been shot several times, 1 bullet piercing his heart. There was no sign of a burglary or a struggle. There were only 2 people at the scene, and one of them was dead. The story begins as a beautiful marriage between 2 colleagues, a soldier who spent time in the Iraqi desert and a smart, caring programmer. They shared deep love and believed nothing could ever come between them. But love turned to obsession. Meetings turned to arguments, and the final night ended in gunfire. Anita Smithay said she was attacked and had no choice but to defend herself. Investigators doubted her account, Were her wounds signs of self-defense or self-inflicted? Were the 3 gunshots the result of panic or intention? This is the story of a broken love, a night of terror, and a confession that still divides public opinion. Was it self-defense or murder? Anita Smythe lived in Apopka, Florida, USA, and had 2 children from her first marriage. She met her second husband, Robert Klein, when they both worked for the same company, Robert in sales, and Anita as a programmer. Robert was a medic who served in Operation Desert Storm in Iraq. He was raising 2 young children after his first wife, Deborah, died of a heart attack in 2003. His wife's death devastated him, and Anita became his best friend, helping him through the difficult time. While working together, they discovered many similarities, especially in their views on raising children. During Anita's difficult divorce in 2004, Robert offered her emotional support. Anita eventually gained full custody of her children. Their friendship gradually turned into love. Since Anita was officially single, their relationship deepened. They dated for a while and married in May 2007. The first years of their marriage were quite happy. But gradually the conflicts increased. After 3 years of marriage, they broke up and lived apart for about 3 months. Even so, their feelings for each other persisted, and they started dating again, though they decided not to remarry. Anita often told friends she couldn't let go of Robert, as they remained strongly drawn to each other. Their meetings, however, frequently ended in arguments and frustration. They eventually decided to limit physical intimacy to reduce tension. But this approach failed to improve things. On the night of May 4, 2010, police received a call from a distressed woman claiming she had shot her ex-husband in self-defense. When officers arrived, they found Anita Smythe covered in bruises and cuts. She was sitting at the entrance of her home around 2:00 a.m., holding a blood-soaked towel against her chest and waiting for help. Her injuries included a forehead bruise, a chipped tooth, cuts on her neck and face, and split lips. Inside the house, Robert's body was found. He had multiple gunshot wounds, one of which had struck his heart and proved fatal. At 4:38 a.m., an officer visited Anita in the hospital to question her. While the incident was initially considered self-defense, further investigation was needed to confirm the details. Although still in shock, Anita agreed to talk. She said Robert had come to spend the evening with her, offering her a drink. And the two had been intimate. They had agreed he would leave afterward, but he stayed late. When Anita asked him to go home, fearing their night would again end in conflict, he refused. An argument broke out, likely intensified by alcohol. Robert allegedly attacked her, pushing her onto the bed and pinning her down. He demanded they get back together. Anita tried to calm him and asked him to leave, but he refused. Although they continued meeting, she did not want to remarry him. In a fit of rage, he allegedly stabbed her several times and then held a knife to her throat. She resisted and tried to calm him down, reminding him that the police would hold him responsible if she died. Robert did not seem to mind. He insisted that the detectives would be unable to prove anything because he had a solid alibi. He said he left after the children were asleep, and they could confirm that he was home all night. The argument escalated. When Anita refused to yield and insisted on ending their relationship, Robert slapped her again. The blow caused her to lose a tooth and tear her lip. Still not satisfied, Robert tries to abuse Anita. In panic, she grabbed the pistol she kept in her nightstand and shot him. On the surface, it looked like a typical case of self-defense, but many details were unclear. Anita was questioned 2 hours after the incident, and due to shock, her memory of the event seemed uncertain. The police postponed further questioning until she had calmed down. Meanwhile, the forensic team examined the scene and quickly discovered many irregularities. Anita's statement was inconsistent in many places. The next morning, when asked again, she said that the confusion was due to shock. But in her account, several details had changed. Although she still claimed self-defense, she seemed to be trying to rearrange the facts in her favor. Veteran detectives had seen similar behavior when an offender tries to appear as the victim. Anita reiterated that she was assaulted by Robert but expanded her testimony to include more information about their relationship. She said they had separated 3 months earlier because of Robert's hostile and aggressive behavior. According to her, Robert was also under financial stress. He had missed mortgage payments for nearly a year and unsuccessfully applied for a Department of Defense assistance program. Anita claimed these struggles fueled his anger, causing him to lash out, even at the children. She said he often belittled them and demanded they leave the house he saw as solely his. Despite both contributing equally during their marriage, Robert wanted complete ownership of the property. While Anita was seeking fair compensation, her children from a previous marriage confirmed that Robert had been aggressive toward their mother. Though they said they didn't feel emotionally pressured themselves, Robert's children, however, saw things differently. They said Anita provoked most of the conflicts. Robert's friends also denied he was aggressive, believing their split stemmed from personality clashes. Anita was described as lively and emotional, while Robert was seen as a calm, gentle giant. He was a large, athletic man but considered kind-hearted. Text message analysis showed that Robert often sent Anita loving words and expressed his desire to mend the relationship. An acquaintance of Anita said she had complained about Robert's controlling tendencies. However, Anita had never reported domestic violence to the police. She said the first serious argument took place just before they broke up. From then on, Robert was often angry, threw things, punched walls, and screamed incessantly. When asked why she hadn't called the authorities, Anita said she was too afraid. She claimed Robert's outbursts terrified her and that he once threatened her 13-year-old son, who tried to call emergency services. The boy was crying and scared, but Robert continued to torment them. Anita said she was afraid she wouldn't have enough time to call the police, so she thought it best to stay quiet. They left once Robert calmed down. Anita later decided not to report the incident because Robert begged her to keep it quiet. He was an insurance agent, and if he were prosecuted, he could lose his license, his job, and his income. What's noteworthy is that later conversations with Anita's children showed that they were not greatly affected. They had never been harmed by Robert. So some people believed that Anita was trying to pin the blame on him as a way to prove that she was the victim. After several serious arguments, the two divorced, but then started dating again. It was unclear who initiated the reunion. Anita insisted that Robert begged her to take him back, apologized repeatedly, and even behaved like a stalker. Robert's relatives, however, claimed it was Anita who wanted to rekindle the relationship. After moving out with her children, Anita allowed Robert to visit her home regularly. He came by weekly, sometimes several times a week. He seemed to be interested only in the physical. Although Anita didn't object, he continued to be violent. It all happened again on May 3 and 4, the day of the tragedy. While they argued, Anita tried to shoo him away, but he ignored her. A knife suddenly appeared in his hand, the handle wrapped in a napkin. Anita realized he was serious, because he held the knife in a way that would not leave fingerprints. Instead of calming down, Robert put a knife to her throat and abused her. In describing the attack, Anita mentioned details that investigators found suspicious, including his use of the napkin and the way their bodies were positioned. She said she lay beneath him on the bed as he held the knife to her throat. When Robert became distracted while reaching for lubricant, Anita retrieved a pistol from the top drawer of her nightstand and quietly placed it under his pillow. He didn't notice. After the assault ended, she pressed the pistol to his chest. Robert didn't resist. Instead, he collapsed onto her with his full weight, which she could not support. As she struggled under him, the gun discharged, Anita insisted the shooting was accidental. She claimed she had aimed at his stomach and that the weapon shifted when Robert tried to push it away. The bullet hit his heart, and he died instantly. Police began to suspect that it was not entirely self-defense. They reconstructed the scene, analyzed the location of the body and objects, and found many inconsistencies in Anita's story. They began to suspect that Anita might have inflicted her own knife wounds to make her account appear more credible. They found a small folding knife next to the bed where the shooting occurred. Anita's eldest son later claimed it was his own, which was odd, since his room was far from his mother's, and Anita had never mentioned that Robert had been there. Anita's eldest son also had no reason to leave a knife in his mother's room. Investigators reasoned that if Robert had really planned to harm Anita, he would have used a more accessible weapon, perhaps something from the kitchen or one of his own. Using her son's folding knife seemed improbable. The next issue in dispute was how many shots were actually fired. Although Anita claimed there had only been one, a ballistics analysis showed that 3 shots had been fired, 2 of which she never mentioned. It was also unclear when those 2 additional shots occurred. Notably, one of the bullets was blank and was determined to be the first shot. Anita said she did not remember the details because she was frightened and in shock. Despite this, she remembered other aspects of the event clearly, making investigators doubt her explanation. They began to suspect she was adjusting her story to fit a self-defense claim. Evidence, while circumstantial, started to suggest premeditation. After the first attempt to shoot failed, Anita pulled the trigger several more times. She claimed she did this because Robert became violent once he realized she was about to shoot him. Anita said she had acted out of fear during the struggle and had no choice but to defend herself. Police, however, were already skeptical. Even the detectives couldn't agree on how to interpret the inconsistencies in her story. Anita's version conflicted with the ballistics results, raising serious doubts. Another suspicious detail was the jar of coconut oil. Anita said the oil bottle was always on the nightstand because they often used it during intimacy. But when detectives arrived at the scene, they found the jar in the bathroom instead. Nobody could explain how it got there. Anita insisted she hadn't moved it, saying she went straight to a neighbor's house after the shooting. However, as questioning continued, she became more anxious, and her story began to shift. At first, the changes were minor, but over several hours, her account altered significantly. She eventually admitted that Robert hadn't reached for the oil on the nightstand. He had gone into the bathroom. During that time, she hid the gun under his pillow. Detectives found this detail highly suspicious. Anita had been presenting herself as the victim, but this new version made her look like a calculated killer. If there had been no real threat, why use a gun at all? The incident involving the knife also raised suspicions. There was no evidence that Robert brought the knife into Anita's son's bathroom. Detectives believe she wrapped the knife handle in a napkin to avoid fingerprints. The napkin was never found, making it impossible to determine whose DNA had been on it. Forensic experts examined both Robert's body and Anita's injuries. Their analysis suggested Anita had used her son's knife to make several shallow cuts on herself, staging them to appear as defensive wounds. In truth, there was no sign that Robert had attacked her. The conclusion is that she wanted Robert dead. Although her motives remain unclear, Anita explained that the knife had been bought for her eldest son in October for airsoft practice. But later, she and Robert decided it was too dangerous for a 13-year-old and banned him from using it. When detectives pointed out inconsistencies about the knife, Anita again changed her story. Partial fingerprints found on the handle matched Anita's, while none belonged to Robert. Their placement suggested she had simply held the knife normally, not in the course of a struggle. Despite this, Anita later claimed she had grabbed the knife during the fight, which could explain her prints. When experts examined the cuts on her body and compared them to her description of the struggle, they concluded the wounds could not have been inflicted by another person. The direction and position of each cut clearly indicated they were self-inflicted. Still, Anita kept insisting they were not. However, until the last minute, the detectives did not reveal the full truth they had discovered during their search of the house to Anita. They had discovered that her account of a violent struggle on the bed was false. The bed linen showed no trace of blood from either Anita or Robert. Instead, blood was found near the bedside table, on the carpet, and on Anita herself. The analysis shows that Robert was shot while standing, from a distance farther than that of direct contact in a struggle. It appeared that he entered the room and was almost immediately shot. When confronted, Anita's story unraveled. She admitted lying about the struggle on the bed. Robert had never held her down. She claimed that the struggle actually happened near the bed, involving a knife. Later, Anita confessed that she had inflicted wounds on herself. Fearing the police would not believe her claim of self-defense, Anita insisted she hadn't meant to kill Robert and only lied because she thought no one would believe her. She said her greatest fear was losing her children and going to prison. However, investigators felt this was a plea for sympathy. They no longer believed her self-defense claim and began to look for evidence of premeditation. The autopsy showed that Robert had been shot twice, once in the abdomen and once in the heart, the latter being fatal. Detectives concluded it was unlikely to be accidental. They suspected Anita wanted to get rid of Robert, who she described as controlling or clingy. But the lack of any police reports or domestic violence complaints made her claims doubtful. The excuse of losing her insurance license was absurd given the threat to her life. After several interrogations, detectives reconstructed the entire course of events, which Anita eventually admitted. Most of her earlier claims were dismissed. She maintained only that Robert was cruel and aggressive, but his family strongly denied this, saying she was tarnishing his memory. No one in Robert's family or friends confirmed that he had ever been violent. He had no criminal record, apart from minor traffic violations. Eventually, Anita Smithy was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. Because there wasn't enough evidence to prove premeditation, she was released on bail after her father sold his farm to cover the bond. While incarcerated, she befriended an inmate named Kim, who was also accused of killing her husband and awaiting trial. Kim had received a 40-year sentence in 2009 and worried that Anita might face the same fate. The two women stayed in contact as Anita's case proceeded. Prosecutors spent months gathering new evidence and building their argument. Anita's trial for Robert Klein's death began in 2016, with both their families and friends in attendance. The case divided opinions. Some saw Anita as a victim of long-term abuse, while others demanded justice for Robert. During the trial, prosecutors revealed what they believed was the real motive. Robert had stopped paying his share of the mortgage, putting Anita at risk of losing her home. For years, she had been covering half the payments on her own. If the house was lost, she would lose everything. According to investigators, Robert refused to give her ownership, believing he could resolve his financial troubles, but evidence suggested otherwise. They concluded that the murder and the fabricated self-defense claim were part of a plan for Anita to keep the house and become its sole owner. Financially, she was in a better position and capable of paying off the debts Robert had left behind. At trial, several witnesses testified that Anita was the one who initiated the family disputes. They also heard her raise her voice and show anger toward Robert. The investigation also revealed that she did not have a license to carry a firearm. Consequently, in addition to the second-degree murder charge, she faced charges for the illegal purchase, possession, and use of a firearm. Although the defense attorney tried to portray Anita as a victim, the jury still found her guilty. She was sentenced to 40 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after serving 70% of her sentence. Just 30 days later, Anita successfully appealed. This came after she changed attorneys. The first trial was found to be unfair due to numerous errors, and Anita was not given adequate legal assistance. The Court of Appeal concluded that her former lawyer did not meet the constitutional standard of effective assistance. Another important factor was the misconduct of the detectives during the interrogation. In the recording later released, Anita stated that she wanted to speak to a lawyer, but the detectives continued to question her, violating her right to silence. The appeals court found that Anita's statement admitting she had inflicted her own wounds with a knife was coerced under pressure from the detective. During the retrial, the jury encountered conflicting evidence and testimony, which made reaching a verdict difficult. Her new attorney managed to keep some sensitive information confidential, which strengthened her defense. By 2021, Anita had served a little over 6 years in prison. She pleaded not guilty to second-degree murder, was acquitted, and released that same year. However, she received a 10-year probation sentence. Additionally, Anita was ordered to pay $41,000 in court costs and restitution to Robert's family. Her acquittal was largely due to several strategic mistakes made by the prosecution, investigators, and the previous court. Errors that her new lawyer effectively used to her advantage. Notably, Kim also asserted that Anita was wrongly convicted and always believed in her innocence. Kim and Anita remain in contact. Kim told reporters she had long awaited Anita's release, believed in her innocence, and had even considered helping her escape. Anita claims that both women were victims of domestic violence and government mistreatment. She has attempted to become an activist for individuals in similar situations but has seen little success. In one interview, Anita proposed partnering with Kim to create a law firm dedicated to defending people facing comparable cases. Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of Lindley Rennick. Ben Rennick was born on August 4, 1987, in St. Louis, Missouri, USA. He was the second and youngest child in his family. His older brother, Sam, considered Ben a precious gift from the moment he was born. From a young age, Ben developed a fascination with snakes. While attending Montgomery County High School, he immersed himself in learning about them and dreamed of starting a snake breeding business. Although this hobby was uncommon, he found it incredibly interesting. As a child, Ben met Lindley, a girl 4 years his senior. She was beautiful, with long, light hair and delicate features, but Ben was too young to pursue a relationship, so nothing happened between them. After graduating high school, Ben continued to focus on his passion for snakes, expanding his knowledge and gaining respect from other experts in the field. 2 years later, Ben's mother passed away from a serious illness. While this was a painful experience, he decided to move forward, possibly to ease the shock. He focused all his efforts on turning his hobby into a source of income, and eventually, his hard work paid off. By 2010, Ben Rennick had become a successful breeder and established a national business called Rennick Reptiles, which specialized in the selective breeding of designer pythons. The business quickly thrived, and soon, reptiles were being sold to customers worldwide, from the UK to Japan. Although Sam and Ben had separate homes, they continued to live on the family farm with their father, honoring their mother's wish not to abandon it after her passing. The 28-acre property provided ample space, allowing the brothers to maintain a close relationship. They often spent weekends fishing together and enjoyed a strong brotherhood. As the business grew, the facility became home to over 3,000 reptiles, some valued at $1,000 each. Ben enjoyed success and often traveled to conventions across the United States, earning a reputation as a prominent figure in the reptile community, even being referred to as the rock star of snakes. In interviews, he attributed his success to his careful attention to his pets and his commitment to his clients. In 2011, he felt particularly fortunate when he reconnected with Lindley, a girl he had had a crush on during his youth. Before reconnecting with Ben, Lindley had been in several relationships. She was initially involved with a man named Michael Humphrey, who was later imprisoned for banned substance possession. After another unsuccessful relationship, Lindley became a mother to a son. By the time she reached out to Ben again, she was single, and Ben had matured, making their communication smooth and comfortable. Ben confidently pursued Lindley, and their relationship quickly became serious. Ben quickly became overwhelmed by the success he achieved at a young age. He was a respected professional, admired by many. Ben was not only business-minded but also kind and mature for his age, which allowed him to take on a fatherly role for Lindley's son, whom he embraced as his own. Eventually, Lindley, her son, and Ben began living together. Tragedy struck the family in 2012 when Frank, the father of Ben and Sam, was involved in a stock scheme that caused significant financial losses for many people. Then, Ben discovered that his father had taken his own life. This devastating event forced the brothers to inherit the family property and confront their loss once again, now complicated by the shame surrounding the incident. Ben found comfort in his personal professional project and in a long-awaited moment with Lindley. In 2014, she accepted his marriage proposal, and that year, they celebrated a wedding. Soon after, they welcomed a daughter named Emma. In his free time, Ben enjoyed playing the drums and watching horror films, but his main focus was on his family. He valued the time spent with his wife and children. To keep the romance alive, he organized weekly date nights with Lindley, just as they had done when they were engaged. This was also his way of showing appreciation for Lindley's hard work, as she dedicated herself to helping him manage their snakes, which involved cleaning and sorting. In 2016, they launched a second business, this time in the personal hygiene sector. They opened a spa in a shopping center in Columbia, Missouri, something Lindley had always dreamed of, given her background as an experienced massage therapist. She invited her longtime friend, Ashley Shaw, to join the salon. Their success continued into 2017, when Ben made $1 million deal selling some of his pythons and anacondas. The agreement included quarterly payments of $200,000, starting with the first payment in February. However, Lindley's business was facing serious financial problems. In early 2017, she had credit debt, and two companies sued her for over $88,000 in unpaid bills for work done in previous years. Additionally, Lindley was hiding more than just her financial troubles. She created a profile on a dating app and began an affair with a man named Brandon Blackwell, meeting him a few times each month. For reasons that could include her financial struggles, ambition, or feelings of betrayal, Lindley started to contemplate how to rid herself of her husband, Ben, although she never openly expressed this desire. Lindley confided in Ashley, who worked at the spa, claiming that she was a victim of violence and abuse from Ben. Taking advantage of this situation, she persuaded her friend to help her escape. Ashley agreed and provided Lindley with banned substance. On one night in 2017, Lindley secretly drugged Ben by spiking his protein shake with a nearly lethal dose of illegal substances. Miraculously, Ben survived the ordeal, although he became very ill and took a long time to recover. Throughout this process, he never suspected that his wife was involved. The bank that Lindley was in debt to informed Ben of the situation. Aware of the crisis at the spa and his wife's deception, Ben spoke up and shared his feelings with her. This led to a tense atmosphere between them that lasted for several weeks. In mid-May 2017, Lindley decided to contact her ex-boyfriend Michael, who had just been released from prison. She and Ashley visited him at his home. During their conversation, which seemed casual as they reminisced about their past relationship, Lindley claimed to be a victim of an abusive husband. She even confessed to Michael about her failed attempt to use a protein drink to escape her situation. Lindley expressed that she felt trapped and was determined to file for divorce, but she was also afraid of how Ben would react, fearing that his response could threaten her life and the lives of her children. While continuing her affair with Brandon, Lindley made the mistake of sharing every detail of her plans to remove Ben from her life. On June 8, 2017, Lindley and her ex-boyfriend Michael went to the farm, equipped with gloves, a gun, and a plan. Lindley intended to introduce Michael as an old friend interested in Ben's business. However, when Michael saw Ben busy cleaning the breeding facilities, he felt uneasy. He asked Lindley to go back to the car, where he handed her the gun and suggested that she take charge of the plan. Without hesitation or fear, Lindley returned to the scene and, seeing that Ben was focused on his work, she attacked him multiple times. Michael picked up most of the shell casings he found, but he missed a few that were left behind. Afterward, he and Lindley went to the spa, where Lindley removed her clothes. Ashley was there, and Lindley asked her to help wash her body and arms thoroughly. During this time, Lindley explained to Ashley what had happened. Later, Lindley returned to the snake nursery and pretended to be surprised and upset. She called Sam to inform him about Ben's situation. Sam rushed to the scene, upon arrival, thought Ben had been bitten by an anaconda because his skull looked crushed and there were 2 puncture wounds on his arm that resembled bite marks. Sam immediately called emergency services. Montgomery County Coroner Dave Colbert had described the scene as one of the strangest and most dangerous he had encountered in his 20-year career. Investigators searched the nursery, which housed 10-foot pythons and anacondas weighing over 90 kilograms. They were unsure where the anaconda might be hiding. As they carefully examined the area, Colbert made a shocking discovery: Ben's body, lying face down, concealed the actual cause of death. It wasn't an anaconda bite that killed him, he had been attacked with a weapon 8 times at close range. Investigators initially considered the possibility of a botched robbery but dismissed it since none of the snakes were missing. The evidence at the crime scene suggested that Ben was familiar with his killer. The agents decided to closely monitor those who were closest to Ben, ensuring that no potential suspects were overlooked. The day after the murder, detectives questioned Sam and then Lindley. A surprising moment occurred when Lindley tried to blame Sam for the crime, but this theory was never pursued. Sam, who had no gunpowder residue on his hands and fully cooperated with the investigation, was released. While the detectives continued their work, the community of reptile breeders came together to support Ben's wife and children by organizing an online auction for snakes. However, just 11 days after Ben's murder, Lindley, who everyone thought was grieving, made a shocking confession during another interrogation of her. She revealed that at the time of the murder, she had an alibi: she was with Brandon, her affair partner. Detectives investigated the alibis of Lindley and Brandon, confirming they were not involved. Next, they questioned Ashley. At the same time, they examined Lindley and Ben's Facebook accounts, discovered that the spa was facing financial difficulties, which had made Ben very angry. For months after the incident, Lindley returned to the police station and agreed to take a polygraph test. However, the test was unsuccessful when she was asked about her relationship with her ex-boyfriend Michael and the messages they had exchanged in the hours surrounding Ben's death. Lindley stated that Michael had visited the snake farm as a client. Lindley faced a lot of circumstantial evidence that seemed to implicate her, and investigators made this clear to her. However, her gunshot residue test came back negative. Without any witnesses, a murder weapon, or direct evidence tying her to the crime, the officers had no option but to let her go free from the interrogation room. A few weeks later, claiming financial difficulties, Lindley closed the spa and quickly left town. Before leaving, she put the family property up for sale. In February 2018, she applied for 2 types of property payments from the family allowance, totaling $15,000, along with monthly family benefits. That summer, she sold Ben's property to a married couple for over $740,000, unaware that the police were suspicious of her. Sam remained oblivious to her connection to his brother's murder. Months passed with no arrests made. Snake enthusiasts confused and reached out to each other for any information about the case. Sam and others in Ben's close circle wanted to support Lindley as much as they could. However, as time passed, they noticed something was wrong when she refused to talk to them, wouldn't let Sam see the children, and prevented him from taking Ben's belongings. A year and a half after Ben's murder, Lindley and Brandon had a child together, but Lindley soon claimed that Brandon had become aggressive, leading her to break up with him. She also secured a restraining order against him and accused him of violence. Brandon denied these claims but ended up in jail because of them. Meanwhile, speculation grew about the murder, with many people suspecting that Lindley might have been involved or even orchestrated it through someone else. This question lingered for nearly 3 years without any answers, leaving authorities with little progress in the investigation. In January 2020, the case took an unexpected, welcome turn. Brandon, who was in jail, decided to make a deal. He contacted the police to share what he knew about Ben's unsolved murder case, claiming he was closely involved. This prompted a renewed investigation. On January 16, 2020, the police arrested Lindley and Michael for murder, shocking their close friends. Sam felt relieved to finally learn the truth. However, investigators needed more evidence. They sought a witness who could provide crucial details. The detectives then arrested Ashley and explained her potential legal consequences. She could either align with Lindley and face severe charges as an accomplice or cooperate with the investigation, which could lead to Lindley being charged with first-degree murder. The authorities promised Ashley leniency if she agreed to cooperate. She ultimately revealed everything, from the harmful ingredients in the lethal cocktail to the details of the murder. Nonetheless, the murder weapon was still missing. By the end of 2021, Sam was preparing for the trials against the alleged murderers of his brother. He was mainly focused on staying composed throughout the process. Lindley's defense team was working hard to prevent Brandon's testimony from being included in the trial. The prosecution argued that Lindley had fired the gun and that Michael Humphrey was also part of the plan. The defense countered by claiming that Lindley had tricked Michael into coming to a snake farm by telling him she needed protection for a divorce discussion with Ben. They stated that Michael was caught off guard when Lindley suddenly pulled out a weapon and attacked Ben. Ultimately, the jury did not see Michael as an innocent witness and found him guilty of first-degree murder after several hours of deliberation. Facing a life sentence, Michael changed his account, claiming he had supplied the gun used by Lindley. He agreed to cooperate with the investigation in hopes of being released on parole. He guided the investigators to the murder weapon, which had been hidden in the attic of Lindley's mother's house. With the weapon recovered, the jury now had to address the lingering question: who actually pulled the trigger? The prosecution painted Lindley as a woman as cold-blooded as one of Ben's snakes, portraying her as a killer who attacked Ben and then continued her day as if nothing had happened. As the trial neared its conclusion, the defense made a bold move by allowing Lindley to recount the troubled and violent marriage she claimed she was escaping. However, she had no evidence to support her story, and there were no police reports documenting any physical abuse. Nearly 5 years had passed since Ben's murder, and a weary Sam awaited the jury's decision regarding Lindley. After 12 hours of deliberation, the judge delivered the verdict. Lindley Rennick was sentenced to 16 years in prison. Sam's disappointment with the sentence seemed to resonate with the judge, but Missouri state laws prevented any increase in the sentence. Lindley would become eligible for parole in 2035, and the charges against Brandon were dismissed. Ben's close friends still remember him as if he were alive. A new species of snake, called the Rennick ghost, was named in his honor. This snake is distinct for having fewer black spots, which gives it a ghostly appearance, a strong symbol of how much he meant to the community. They continue to miss him deeply, and at every event his friends attend, there is always an empty spot that can never be filled. Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of Jody Myers. One day, 20-year-old Jody Myers and her fiancé, 31-year-old Neil Archer, were attending a birthday party for Jody's stepfather. Although the celebration was lively, Neil was not enjoying themselves. Neil was reluctant to participate and chose to sit in Jody's car while she mingled with family and friends by the fireplace. Jody frequently had to return to the car to convince Neil to join the party. Some guests even brought him snacks in hopes of cheering him up. Around 8:30 p.m. Neil and Jody left the party, and their argument occurred at home. Jody's mother, Lucy, received a message from her daughter stating that she couldn't come home that night because she had broken up with Neil, and she changed her phone number. Jody mentioned she would let her parents know where she was later, that she had moved to a different area, and that she had quit her job. Once things calmed down, she promised to explain everything in detail. Jody also assured her mother that she was safe, that her friends were with her, and she also expressed her love for her family. The message was poorly written and lacked punctuation, which concerned Lucy. She noticed several spelling errors, which were also unusual for Jody, who generally had no issues with spelling and grammar. Normally, if she made a mistake, she would quickly correct it, but in this case, she did not. One possible explanation for Jody's behavior is that she was feeling rushed or stressed after breaking up with her fiancé the night before. However, it was puzzling why Jody would take the time to write a message when she was likely overwhelmed. This causes Jody's mother and sisters to suspect that she was not the one who sent the message. Furthermore, Jody would never abandon her 2-year-old son, Elijah, who she had with Neil. Her family was certain of this. Elijah was the center of Jody's life, and she loved him dearly. Friends and family believed that if Jody had intended to leave, she would have taken him with her. This concern prompted the family to report Jody's disappearance to the police. The family members were reluctant to accept that something terrible might have happened, but they were also worried about losing precious time. Doubts began to arise in their minds, and they feared that the police might not take their report seriously, as cases of missing young women who had argued with their fiancés were often overlooked. However, the police treated Jody's family's report with great seriousness. They were particularly concerned that Jody had left her child behind, which was an unusual situation they couldn't ignore. Detectives quickly launched a search, and public worry grew when it became known that someone had used Jody's bank card to withdraw $250 from an ATM in the city center. This raised the possibility that either Jody was nearby and intended to return, or an unknown person was trying to cover up the situation. Jody Myers was officially reported missing, prompting an investigation. Jody's story quickly gained attention across, especially among investigative teams. Authorities interviewed everyone close to Jody, including her fiancé Neil, but none could provide useful information about her whereabouts. Neil, being the last person to see her, shared details with the police. He revealed that he and Jody had argued on their way home from a party. During the drive, Jody angrily threw her ring out of the window, and the police later searched for it. Neil also stated that he last saw Jody when she got into a red Nissan X-Trail with an unknown man and woman. The police did not disclose that Neil was their main focus. They described him as a valuable witness, but at that point, he was their only person of interest. Extensive searches were conducted in the areas surrounding where Jody was last seen, including local bushland and the Murray River, but no trace of her was found. The ring Jody allegedly threw out of the car also remained missing, despite Neil indicating where it might be. As the investigation progressed, relatives, friends, and acquaintances frequently appeared in the media to discuss the case and share their thoughts. Neil's mother, 57-year-old Margaret Archer, spoke to reporters about her son's partner, Jody. Margaret expressed hope for Jody's return, as she is needed by her son. Meanwhile, Neil addressed the media, responding to their presence outside his house while playing with his son. He took the increased attention calmly, stating only that it was a bit stressful for him, but he was happy to assist the authorities in the investigation. For the purpose of the investigation, the police requested video footage from ATM surveillance cameras and were surprised by what they found. The money had not been withdrawn by Jody or Neil, as they had previously thought. Instead, it was a woman in a hooded sweatshirt, clearly trying to conceal her identity. Detectives quickly identified this woman as Margaret. While her cash withdrawal did not implicate her in murder, she was arrested for theft. It was unclear how Margaret had obtained Jody's bank card and used it after Jody went missing. Margaret might have stolen the card or borrowed it from Jody. Regardless, Margaret strongly denied any involvement in Jody's disappearance, both to the police and in public. After being questioned, she was released on bail. But this unusual situation led investigators to closely examine her actions during the time Jody was missing. Detectives discovered 2 receipts from different hardware stores. Margaret had purchased 10 bags of cement from one store and another 10 bags from a second store, along with a wheelbarrow. These purchases were notable for their large quantity. Investigators needed to verify that these transactions were made by Margaret. They visited the store where Neil's mother had gone 3 days after Jody's disappearance. After reviewing the surveillance footage, they confirmed that Margaret had indeed bought a large amount of cement. However, they questioned why she needed so much. While buying construction materials is not illegal, detectives still needed to understand the context of those purchases. The purchase had been made with the exact amount that Margaret withdrew from the ATM, which left the police confused, until they spoke with Margaret's husband, Lawrence. He explained that on the day Jody went missing, he was in Tasmania. When he returned home, his son Neil told him he had a Father's Day gift. Since Neil rarely showed generosity, he was intrigued. Neil led him to the yard, where a freshly poured concrete slab lay in the shed, which Neil had just finished. Lawrence was surprised, as he thought of Neil as lazy and selfish, but he could see that his son had done a lot of hard work. He thanked Neil for the gift and began sharing stories about his trip to Tasmania. As the detectives listened, they began to connect the dots, realizing that Neil was no longer just a witness. He was now the main suspect in Jody's disappearance. At the same time, Neil's brother, Aaron Archer, felt guilty because he knew something, but was afraid to speak up for fear of implicating his family. Aaron was hesitant to carry out certain tasks requested by relatives. When he learned something troubling, he urged Neil to go to the police, but Neil refused. With no other option, he went to the station and decided to share everything he knew. On September 24, 2015, at midnight, Aaron met with police officers at a predetermined location. Following his brother's visit to the police station, Neil was taken into custody and charged with the murder of his fiancée, Jody Myers. The next day, investigators searched the home of Margaret in Murray Bridge, a town about an hour and a half from Adelaide. During this search, forensic teams discovered a woman's body buried in a shallow grave beneath a concrete slab in the shed. This slab had been a Father's Day gift for Lawrence. Experts later confirmed that the body was Jody Myers, who had been missing for a month. Investigators indicated that the evidence suggested a violent murder had taken place. Afterward, Lucy's son-in-law, Michael Bates, publicly expressed the family's hopes for Jody's safe return until they received the tragic news. Her death created a profound loss for them, but they cherished the loving memories of her as a mother, daughter, and sister, emphasizing that she was not to be blamed for anything. From that point on, the family was left with only memories, which they considered their most precious treasures. A few months later, Margaret was arrested for her alleged involvement in Jody's murder. Despite the charges, Margaret was working hard to prove her innocence. It is believed that Neil's father, Lawrence, was unaware of the events surrounding the case. Then, investigators have built a detailed narrative into the Jody Myers case. After returning home from a party, Jody and Neil had a severe argument. Neil felt that he had not impressed Jody's parents and believed they wanted him and Jody to break up. In a moment of rage, he lost control and strangled Jody with the cord of his hoodie until she stopped breathing. Later, reports surfaced that while in jail, Neil told other inmates that his mother had been present during the argument and had restrained Jody, although this claim could not be substantiated. The following day, Neil asked his mother to help him hide the crime, and Margaret, without hesitation, agreed to dispose of the evidence related to the murder of Jody, who had given her a grandchild. She withdrew cash from the ATM to buy cement and added $10 to Jody's phone to send a message to Jody's family. It became clear that Neil pressured his mother to handle all the illicit activities for him. Margaret had previously been a victim of domestic violence herself, which makes it even more perplexing that she would agree to cover up such a tragic crime. Many people find this behavior abnormal, regardless of a mother's love for her child. It is difficult to believe she would justify helping him in such a horrific situation. However, some parents claim they would do anything for their children, and Margaret likely belonged to this group, which is truly disturbing. Even more alarming is the fact that Jody's 2-year-old son, Elijah, partially witnessed the incident. He was sitting in the car while Margaret visited hardware stores and made purchases. It was also revealed that Elijah was in Margaret's house when Neil transported and buried his mother's body in a shed. As the case progressed, new information shocked the public. The police recorded phone calls between Margaret and Neil discussing how to hide the crime. Both felt guilty and unable to find a solution to their problem. During their conversations, they also mentioned Neil's brother, Aaron. Margaret attempted to involve her second son, and later his half-sister, in the cover-up. She pressured them to burn clothes and destroy evidence, such as cement bags. However, Aaron cleverly refused to comply and eventually reported the situation to the police. In 2016, Neil Archer pleaded guilty to the murder of Jody Myers. In 2017, he was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 22 years. This outcome is relatively favorable by Australian standards, and it is reassuring that the murderer accepted his guilt. In South Australia, a guilty plea can lead to a sentence reduction of about 30%, but the judge determined that Neil did not merit this reduction. Jody's friends and family were pleased with the verdict. Meanwhile, Margaret Archer hesitated until the last moment to admit her wrongdoing. She changed her story and confessed. Her lawyer claimed that Margaret had always lived a good life and cared deeply for her large family. However, considering that she waited until the very end, unwilling to confess to the crime, one can easily conclude that Margaret felt no remorse for her actions. In 2018, she was sentenced to 6.5 years in prison for aiding a criminal. Then, she was released in June 2022. Meanwhile, little Elijah is being cared for by his grandmother, Lucy. Moldova, December 2020. In the courtroom, silence reigns, broken only by the occasional click of camera shutters. On the defendant's bench sits 21-year-old Anna Lajkovic, a medical student. These are her first public hearings since her arrest, and her behavior shocks everyone present. She does not hide from the cameras. She reclines casually on the bench, cleaning her nails, smiling as if she were at a fashion shoot, rather than in court. The prosecutor read the indictment. Anna was convicted of the murder of her mother, Dr. Praskovia Lajkovic. She listens silently, her gaze vacant and indifferent. Moldova is a small Eastern European state, nestled between Ukraine and Romania. Since the collapse of the Soviet Union, the country has struggled for decades with poverty, political instability. Salaries are among the lowest in Europe. Thousands of citizens leave each year to work abroad, and corruption remains pervasive. In European rankings, Moldova consistently occupies the lowest positions, surpassed only by a few other post-Soviet states. Amid this general decline, the autonomous region of Gagauzia stands out. Located in the south of the country, roughly 60 miles from the capital, it is a territory with special status and its own parliament. The local population, mostly Gagauz, live modestly. Working in agriculture and small businesses, unemployment is higher here than in other regions. Yet, among ordinary homes, one can spot mansions built by those who tapped into local political or commercial structures. Anna was born in Comrat, the capital of Gagauzia, into a family whose status contrasted sharply with most others. The Lykovich, Aladov family was among those in Moldova who lived by their own rules. Anna's father, Vasily Aladov, was a well-known entrepreneur and politician in Gagauzia, deeply involved in the region's public life. He owned several plots of land and companies whose income often did not match the figures in official reports. He faced repeated investigations on suspicion of financial irregularities and budget manipulation. Yet all cases were eventually closed without consequence. Vasily Aladov attempted twice to become governor of Gagauzia. Both campaigns ended in scandal. The first, disqualified due to insufficient verified signatures. The second, after the Ministry of Justice uncovered forged documents and signs of vote tampering. Despite his failed bids, he retained a position in local government and continued his business activities. Maintaining a reputation as a powerful figure, few dared to challenge. Anna's mother, Praskovia Lejković, came from a very different background. A physician by training, she graduated from medical school with honors, worked closely with clinics in Germany. Her career took her between Moldova and Germany, often traveling for assignments. She was regarded as a self-made woman, a model of intelligence and hard work. She provided her daughter with comfort, educational opportunities, and professional connections. The marriage between Vasily and Praskovia was short-lived, as their ambitions and outlooks clashed. After the divorce, Vasily quickly remarried, and Anna gained a half-brother from that union. Despite her parents' separation, Anna's financial situation remained unchanged. She was raised in a world of abundance, little oversight. In her world, money solved everything. Boundaries were non-existent. She was granted near-complete freedom, indulging in impulsive behavior and facing few consequences for school conflicts. Any criticism from teachers or school staff was often followed by those individuals losing their jobs at her parents' behest. Over time, this shaped a personality that didn't recognize limits. Someone who believed every problem could be resolved through connections or wealth. It was her father's political influence, her mother's career success, and the complete lack of structure that formed the basis of Anna Lejković's worldview. From a young age, Anna lived in what could be described as a gilded cage, a world where everything revolved around her. Her parents provided everything they believed symbolized success: private schooling, international travel. However, they neglected core elements of upbringing, such as discipline, responsibility, and boundaries. Praskovia, constantly juggling business trips and her medical career, tried to compensate for her absences with gifts, attention whenever possible. Vasily, with his influence and access, never denied Anna anything. Whatever she wanted, a new item, a vacation, a spot in an elite event, was granted without discussion. No was not part of their vocabulary. Household staff never stayed long. According to people familiar with the family, nannies and helpers frequently faced rude behavior and temperamental demands. This same pattern played out at school. When teachers offered criticism, Anna responded aggressively, and her parents intervened to resolve matters with the administration. Over time, she absorbed a simple lesson. When things didn't go her way, it was someone else's fault. Psychologists describe this kind of upbringing as a breeding ground for narcissistic traits. A young person raised in such an environment can grow up believing their wants matter more than anything else. In Anna's case, that belief was only reinforced by her family's wealth and influence. In a world where money replaced authority, boundaries eventually disappeared altogether. Former classmates recalled that Anna always carried herself as someone special. She craved the spotlight, couldn't handle criticism, and believed she deserved to be treated differently. Even minor slights were taken as personal offenses, and genuine emotional connection seemed to be missing entirely. People were, to her, more like tools for getting what she wanted. By the time she reached her teenage years, this behavior pattern was firmly established. Empathy never took root because neither her family nor her surroundings modeled it. Over time, Anna developed a personality marked by confidence, isolation, and a lack of internal limits. She didn't grasp the line between acceptable and unacceptable behavior. By the time Anna entered college, she had a clear understanding of her advantages, on her appearance, her financial freedom, and a life largely free from rules. After finishing high school, she enrolled in medical school at a university in Russia. She performed well academically, but her interest in medicine ran shallow. For her, studying medicine wasn't about helping others. It was about building an image. It aligned with her desire for status, something she could showcase publicly. Alongside school, she began experimenting with modeling. At first, it was small gigs, photo shoots for local agencies, minor runway events, and commercials. Success in that world deepened her sense of being exceptional. She started attending more social events, networking with young entrepreneurs and influencers. Around this time, she launched her Instagram account, which quickly became her primary tool for self-promotion. Her feed was carefully curated: designer outfits, European vacations, upscale restaurants, exclusive parties, luxurious hotel stays, and a depiction of unconstrained campus life. Each post projected the image of a budding European influencer, a young woman who combined brains, beauty, and independence. By 2020, she had over 10,000 followers, a substantial audience in Moldova, a country with just over 2 million people. The more Anna flaunted her polished lifestyle, the more she craved validation. Likes and comments became a measure of her worth. When she is not given regular attention, she feels anxious, irritable. Eventually, her need for quick gratification spilled beyond social media. It began with alcohol at parties and events, then escalated to stronger substances. The crowd she spent time with didn't see this as a problem. Using illegal substances was viewed as part of the European leisure scene. Outwardly, Anna still looked poised and polished, but mentally, she was beginning to unravel. Her parents tried to intervene. Scovia hired a therapist, hoping regular sessions would help stabilize her daughter. However, therapy didn't work. Anna saw it as an attempt to control her and refused to engage in meaningful conversations about her behavior. By that point, a growing emotional distance had formed between them. Over time, Anna's reliance on substances became ingrained in her persona. She could hide the consequences in front of a camera, but those close to her began to notice the changes: dramatic mood swings, sleepless nights, and emotional outbursts. What remained of her former success was merely a shell. Online, she still appeared confident and carefree, but offline, she was losing touch with herself and with the world she once believed she controlled. In mid-2020, Anna returned from Russia to Moldova. Praskovia hoped that being back home would help her daughter recover. They began living together again in Comrat, in the house that used to feel empty due to Praskovia's frequent business trips. At first, things seemed calm. Praskovia focused on rebuilding trust, avoided arguments, and continued paying for psychological sessions. Anna agreed to attend, but took none of it seriously. FDs. For her, these visits were just something to get through, not a genuine effort to change. It didn't take long for her mother to realize that the calm exterior masked irritation and aggression. Praskovia explained her daughter's behavior as stress, burnout, but the signs of dependency were becoming impossible to ignore. Late-night activity, constant phone calls to friends, emotional instability. On several occasions, she found pills and empty medication packaging in Anna's room, none of which had been prescribed. Then, in the fall of 2020, the first serious crisis hit. Anna was found unconscious in her room after what doctors later confirmed was an overdose. She was rushed to the hospital in critical condition, caused by the use of banned substances. That was the moment Praskovia realized she couldn't handle this alone anymore. After her daughter was discharged, she insisted on full-time supervision and suggested a stay at a rehabilitation center. Anna flatly refused. She told her mother it was a one-time mistake and swore it wouldn't happen again. In an effort to maintain some peace, Praskovia backed off, opting instead for home care and close medical monitoring. For a short while, it seemed like things were improving. Anna was spending more time at home, focusing on her studies, and appeared calmer. But that calm didn't last. Within weeks, the tension returned. Their relationship grew increasingly strained. Any mention of treatment would trigger explosive reactions from Anna. Praskovia tried a softer approach, but every conversation ended in conflict. The house, once a symbol of stability, turned into a battleground of silent hostility. By the end of the year, the atmosphere had become unbearable. Praskovia contacted doctors, researched clinics, and began preparing paperwork for involuntary treatment. It was a last resort. She had no other option. In the final weeks leading up to the tragedy, the tension inside the house had reached a breaking point. Two women under the same roof, living in what felt like two separate realities. A mother desperately trying to save her daughter, and a daughter unwilling, orunable, to admit she needed help. December 4, 2020. Praskovia had just returned from Germany, where she'd spent several days at a professional conference. Friends later said she looked tired but composed and planned to spend the weekend at home with her daughter. That evening, around 7:00 p.m., she arrived at the house she and Anna shared. The housekeeper wasn't there that night. Praskovia had made a firm decision. After repeated failed attempts to convince Anna to enter treatment willingly, she had gathered all the necessary paperwork and filled out the referral forms for a private clinic. At first, the conversation was calm. Praskovia explained why treatment was necessary, framing it as a chance for Anna to regain control of her life. Anna responded first with indifference, then with irritation. When her mother revealed that everything had already been arranged, that doctors were expecting them the next morning, the tension exploded into shouting. According to investigators, Anna accused her mother of controlling her, interfering, and trying to humiliate her. Praskovia tried to de-escalate the situation, but emotions had gone too far. Around 8:00 p.m., there was a sudden outburst of aggression. Anna went to the kitchen and grabbed a knife. She took a knife and stabbed her mother in the chest multiple times. While Praskovia was left bleeding on the floor, Anna is said to have cut out her still beating heart. What followed happened in a matter of minutes. Afterward, Anna went to the bathroom. She carefully cleaned herself, changed clothes, and left the house. Investigation documents noted that she showed no visible signs of panic and kept her phone, personal documents with her. Anna went to her boyfriend's nearby apartment. According to him, she walked in calmly and said, "It's over. She's not in the way anymore." At first, he thought it was just a dramatic way of describing a fight. But as Anna shared more details, laughing almost jokingly, he began to realize it might be more serious. When he asked her directly if she was telling the truth, she just shrugged and laughed. Late that night, they left his apartment, bought champagne, and went out to a restaurant. Witnesses said Anna showed no signs of stress. She looked relaxed, even carefree. After dinner, she stayed the night at his place. The next morning, while Anna was still asleep, her boyfriend decided to check for himself. He went to the Lajkovic home. The front door was unlocked, and the house was silent. Inside the house, he was horrified to discover Praskovia's body. Immediately, he called emergency services. Law enforcement arrived shortly after. Officers documented the scene and quickly identified Anna as a person of interest. Neighbors reported hearing shouting the night before, but said they hadn't intervened, assuming it was a typical family argument. After receiving a report from Anna's boyfriend, a search for the suspect was launched. Authorities eventually located her at a friend's home in a nearby district. During the arrest, she didn't resist. She was calm and detached. After her arrest, Anna was taken to the Comrat Police Department holding facility. Detectives pieced together a clear timeline of her actions after the incident and determined that she had composure, showing no visible panic. During her first interrogation, Anna denied any wrongdoing and appeared confident. Her answers were brief, often accompanied by a faint smile. One investigator later said, "It seemed as if she didn't take any of it seriously." That impression would later be confirmed by a psychological evaluation. Experts observed a lack of emotional response to the gravity of the situation, something that diverged sharply from what would be expected in a high-stress event. The assessment described Anna as having strong narcissistic tendencies, a pattern of manipulative behavior, and a flair for the dramatic. She showed no signs of remorse or guilt. Meanwhile, witness statements were being gathered. Neighbors reported hearing shouting on the night of December 4000, but didn't intervene, thinking it was just another argument. Friends, acquaintances confirmed that tensions between Anna and her mother had escalated in recent months, mostly over the subject of treatment. One university lecturer shared that, shortly before returning to Moldova, Anna had seemed unstable and often spoke about feeling pressured by her family. Anna's father, Vasily Aladov, did not speak publicly. However, relatives from his side of the family claimed they did not believe she was responsible, suggesting that she may have experienced a psychological breakdown. The story of a medical student accused of committing a crime against her physician mother spread rapidly through regional and international news. Final hearings were held in Chisinau in December 2021. By then, the investigation had lasted nearly a year. Dozens of interviews had been conducted, independent evaluations ordered, and psychiatric records reviewed. The trial itself was closed to the public, but the main findings were later confirmed by official sources. According to a psychiatric evaluation, at the time of the incident, Anna was in a psychological state that prevented her from fully understanding the nature and consequences of her actions. The assessment revealed signs of a severe mental disorder, exacerbated by psychoactive substances and emotional instability. The prosecution pushed for the maximum sentence, insisting Anna was fully responsible for her actions. They pointed to the sequence of events following the crime: cleaning herself, changing clothes, and attempting to flee, as evidence of intent and awareness. However, the defense submitted additional medical reports and expert testimony, all reinforcing the argument that Anna had lost control of her behavior. After reviewing both sides, the court accepted the findings of the psychiatric experts. Anna Lajkovic was ruled not criminally responsible and was ordered to undergo compulsory treatment at a high-security psychiatric facility. The sentence was open-ended. Her release would only be possible if a medical board determined she had shown consistent, verifiable improvement. Public reaction to the verdict was deeply divided. Some in Gagozia and Chisinau considered it a just outcome, while others saw it as preferential treatment, possibly influenced by family connections. Journalists noted that in Moldova, where life sentences for women are not legally permitted, this verdict amounted to indefinite institutionalization. After the court's decision was announced, prosecutors filed an appeal, but the ruling was upheld. Anna's father declined to speak publicly. Her maternal relatives expressed hope that she would receive the care she needed and never return to her former life.